Hi, I'm Case Lowe, co-host of the Open the Voice Gate podcast. The one question I'm constantly asked when it comes to Dragongate is how do I get into the promotion? Well, stop asking and start listening to the Open the Voice Gate podcast, released every Wednesday on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. For exclusive news and show reviews, look no further than the leader in Dragongate coverage, Open the Voice Gate.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Gotta let it go. So fast to freedom. Dance tonight together. Here everyone is singing. 你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for May 7th, 2024. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find Open the Voice Gate on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network feed or on the dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed on all podcast platforms and applications. You can follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our Red Circle landing site. You click the red box that says sponsor this podcast, and you can set up a one-time or recurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank all of our previous donors. It's a big one this week. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Spears, joined alongside, as always, Case Lowe. And Case, waking up this morning, we will talk about Dead or Alive, and that will be the main crux of this episode, but we want to rip the Band-Aid off immediately. This came 12:34 Central Daylight Time today. Due to injuries sustained during competition, TN Revolucion and Kaito Nagano have both made the decision to retire from pro wrestling effective immediately. Both expressed their gratitude for those who supported them during their careers. Case, we were ready to talk about an excellent Dead or Alive show, but what did we get again? It is Dragongate's worst thing is waking up and getting a bunch of notifications on May 7th. Right, bud?
Oh my God. I mean, we're talking about now going back to 2018, the date of the OWE split. There was last year where you and I were tipped off that Kento and Fujiwara were no longer in the company and were expecting an announcement on May 6th or May 7th. That ended up happening about a month later. And then there's this year. Nothing good seems to happen after Dead or Alive, no matter how good Dead or Alive the show is.
And it's something that, I feel like even before 2018, whenever, after a big show, there's a Dragongate press conference is never really a good thing. And we had it once again. TN Revolution has been injured since last September. Kaito Nagano was able to wrestle a little bit at the beginning of this year. Of course, Jay was on the show last week and was talking about the multitude of injuries for both of these guys. And we both were talking a little bit off air before getting into this. And I feel like that, at least for me at this point, when TN went to ground and there was really no update for a long time, I figured that was the case, especially given other things about TN we'll get into in a moment. And then Nagano's injury history, I did not realize until the J episode how bad it was.
Yeah, let's start with Nagano here. I'm much less surprised by this one. You know, he is a slender man. He's a guy with an extremely small frame, and I was tipped off a few months ago, or I guess it would have been a month or two ago, that he had a pretty severe neck injury. I didn't know until the J episode last week that it was officially a broken neck, but the person I had talked to just kind of let me know, man, he is beat up, and it's going to be a long road to recovery for him. And that didn't surprise me. I really felt like if you remember, he got hurt in September. They were at that Kobe Sambo Hall show, opened the Dragongate tournament. It was Nagano and Tanaka and Kato as sort of a young guys team in the first round of that tournament. They wrestled D-Courage, and that's when Nagano got hurt, and he was out up until the end of November, wrestled spot shows in November, wrestled a few dates in December, wrestled a few dates in January. I didn't think he looked healthy in November, December, January. I didn't think he looked like he wanted to be there. I thought all of his fire was gone. I'm not surprised at all that this is the unfortunate end of his career.
Yeah, and it is something that really, if I want to kind of treat this, and it's something where I find myself, and I hate this case, that I get a little bit more cold each time I hear one of these. And
it's happened a lot over the last few years. We'll go through that list in just a second.
Yeah, but for Nagano in particular, like we talk about like those appearances, and then even in September, it is something that I feel like that consistently for this guy, it just was, he was not able to really stay on the mend. And it was something where like I would say, and I'm not trying to like be dismissive, but it was very kind of clear that it was the injuries kind of piled up for him at a certain point. And it was at a juncture where, I mean, we have now people from 2 classes away from him being debuted. And it's just, it's tough. It's tough. Not everyone is going to be a Ryofuda, I feel like.
No, not everybody can bounce back. I mean, the career of Nagano, to summarize it real quick, I thought very briefly in the end of 2022, and you're talking October, November, December, when he really took up more of a full-time schedule, he sort of was developing into 2017 Shun Skywalker, where, hey, Dragongate needs a hot opening match. Who are we going to put in there? It's Kaito Nagano. If my memory serves me correct, Mike, and you can maybe remember this better than me, I think the first Korakuen show of December 2022 was a free broadcast on Dragongate Network. That was Yoshioka and Mochizuki in the main event.
I believe you're correct about that one. Yes.
Okay, and the opening match on that show was Diamante and Ishin against Dragon Dia and Kaito Nagano, and I feel like that is probably the peak of Nagano right there, because there were a lot of eyeballs on that show, a lot of people who had never seen him before because he had debuted just a few months prior, and he kicked ass in that opening match, and that was sort of his role for the first few months of his career once he graduated from the future, green tights, black tights sort of deal. The peak of his career, I've got one match of his at over 4 stars, and that was he and Yoshiki Kato versus Masaki Mochizuki and Mochizuki Jr., the February 19th Rei Day Pareja show in Fukuoka last year. That's the best thing he ever did. I thought that run he and Kato had in the tag league last year, which unfortunately they were never able to build on, because right after the tag league, Kato got the eye operation, and then right when Kato came back is when Nagano really started battling severe health issues. That, to me, there was real potential there, and credit to Nagano, because I think he helped mold in the very early stages of his career. He turned Kato into a less robotic freak show and more into a Dragongate wrestler. And, by the time that Kato turned the calendar over to 2024, I feel like we still saw some influence of that tag team there. The big man, little man pairing is something that worked really well. So it's a shame we never really got more of that.
Yeah, and it's something where I feel like you brought up that Korakuen. I think that because it was something that it was readily available, and if you look at like even a cage match, you can notice a difference in the amount of people that are rating on things, and you're like, oh yeah, no, there had to be a reason for that. And you said, oh, free Korakuen, that makes sense to me. I feel like that one performance kind of in a way colored the expectation of Nagano, I would say, throughout the remainder of his career, when at a certain point he just I don't know if it was something where like he was not necessarily always the most confident in ring wrestler in a way, but the Kato tag team at the very least kind of put him in a position where he was able to do little man, small man stuff, but was not as reliant on his dives and his high flying and that kind of stuff. That, at least for me, it was something that I felt like never really affected, other than, that December Korakuen. after you saw it the first time, you kind of were like waiting to expect it, and just, it never felt as good as it did with him and Yoshiki Kato.
Yeah, always potential there. You and I really enjoyed him while he was hot, while he was healthy. Always seemed like there was going to be more with him. You look at his cage match, he's got one official title match, a Triangle Gate match last year in Wakayama. Ben, Hulk, and Minoru of Gold Class defending the Triangle Gate belts against Fuji, Nagano, and Kato. I remember that match being just okay. I wanted more. I wanted to see where that character would go. The soccer character I enjoyed. There were raw parts there that I loved. A great Spaceman Plancha, a great Space World, that unique Hurricane Rana that really only he's ever done. And so it's a bummer.
With Diamante, it only looked really good at Diamante, to be clear.
And Shimizu.
Yeah, Shimizu was able to base for it, but it was such a tough move, I felt like.
It was, So, look, I would have really liked to have seen where he would have gone. I would have liked to have seen him and Junior go at it when Junior returns. I would have liked to have seen him and Kato go at it when Kato gets healthy. But we won't, and it's a bummer.
Yeah, and it's something where I just kind of... the thing that would have been very interesting for me with Kato or with Nagano was what would have been the next steps for him. And especially in a promotion where his contemporaries like Yoshiki Kato has already, was full-fledged bad cop for some of this year and was already making those kinds of steps. It was something that I was intrigued with, like, okay, this soccer character, soccer enthusiast, okay, so we've been through these characters enough with Dragongate that we know that this is not the end point for them. I mean, Genki Horiguchi only comes out the surfboard every, few months when they're doing a Torimon match. But I was really intrigued to see where he was going to go. And it's going to be bummed to see that we're not going to see that happen. And then TN Revolution. This is a tough one, I feel like, but this is also something where there's a part of me that, and again, getting more cold about this, it's very easy for me to look at his situation and see it as not dissimilar to a Shoya Sato's and a Sora Fujikawa.
I was always under the belief that he would come back. I just thought the way he was handled when he came back to Japan, it was so clear they wanted to do so much with him.
And do it immediately.
And that's the thing. I've really thought about it all day long, and if I am forgetting somebody, it's probably somebody obvious. If I am, please let me know on the Discord, the Open the Voice Gate channel. I can't think of an accurate historical comparison. He debuted in Korakuen Hall in the main event and won clean, and then cut a post-show promo in which he looked at Yamato, the most accomplished wrestler in Dragon Gate history, and he looked at Madoka Kakuta, the Dreamgate champion at the time, and he said, I kind of thought the competition would be better in Dragon Gate. Guess I'll just go beat everybody now. And the sickening thing is, he had 10 matches. He obviously won all 10. His career in Dragon Gate was a month long. It was the beginning of September 23 through the end of September 23. And I just don't know. I just can't wrap my head around the idea of anybody else even having a career like that. Because if you want to point your finger at Katsumi Takashima, who was the lost guy from the class of 2016, Shun, Ben, Hyo, and Yoshioka, there was also Katsumi Takashima. He debuted in Korakuen Hall. He debuted in a pretty hype match, the 12-1-16 match that you and I have talked about hundreds of times. But he got his ass kicked. He was a Black Tights young boy, and he existed largely as a Black Tights young boy. Sora Fujikawa, who I just rewatched a match of his today, I was reminded of, like, man, boy, that guy could have been something had he not been kicked in the jaw by Masaki Mochizuki. Again, young boy, treated as a young boy, never won. In all of Japanese wrestling history, I don't think there's a career like Nishikawa, and so it becomes undoubtedly, and I saw some people almost hyperbole checking themselves today, do not feel like you have to do that. Undoubtedly, this shoots up the list of the greatest what-ifs in Dragon Gate history. It is very, very close to being the top one because of the level of expectation that we had for this guy. It is unbelievable to think that he was only around for a month, and he had the short-term and to some degree long-term impact that he did.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things that like I feel like that I'm someone that is more than willing to take the wide view, the 20-year kind of, or the 25-year kind of perspective of what's happening with this. And really, if we're talking about Analog's case, like there is no one-to-one. But if you are trying to do like the lazy comp, it's either Milano or Tozawa coming back from excursion. And those were still two completely different things. And Tozawa was not put over as strongly as Nishikawa was in his debut, or his re-debut, even if it was really seen as the big start for Akira Tozawa. He's just an aberration.
It would be like if Tozawa, he comes back in June of 2011 and joins Blood Warriors, and then Mad Blanky forms in technically February of 2012. It would be like if Tozawa's career in Dragongate was only the Blood Warriors portion, that we never got Mad Blanky and we never got Monster Express. If he just went to Raw in 2012, we'd be like, oh man. Like,
case even more crazy, we wouldn't even get Kobe World 2021 if we just go one-to-one, because we're talking about 2 weeks.
Yeah. There's, the thing that you do have to put in perspective, and this is where, I think I trust you and I more than anybody to have this perspective, is yes, in a sense, it's another person, or two more people rather, leaving Dragongate. And I know that is, a consistent talking point. I don't even think it's an incorrect one. I would argue after Dead or Alive, it's not a big deal, and that, their roster is still plenty deep, and I would feel very secure in their short-term and long-term future. But the funny thing with TN Revolucion is you can't even have the conversation of like, oh, what are they going to do with his absence? Like when Kaito Ishida split, there was very clearly a short-term effect where it's like, oh man, what was Ishida going to do? You can't really have that exercise with Revolucion. He was there for a month. They've existed without him plenty now. If anything, it might have screwed up the Gate of Destiny build. It might have screwed up the Final Gate build. Gate of Bayside, the new pay-per-view they had in January this year, was in his hometown. The thought was that whole show might be built around him. That obviously got thrown out by the wayside. Other than that, it's like, we're so clearly living in a post-Revolution world right now that you can't even have that thought experiment. Now, look,
not at all. You really can't. Not to interrupt, but
yeah.
They moved on as soon as Big Hug happened.
Yeah.
Like we were past that.
Now, I've made the joke before of, can I get Sean Oliver in the same way that he did Gabe's Book of ROH Secrets? I think the two things at the top of my list now, and maybe this is a question for you, I'd like to know your thoughts on this, but if we were going to corner Genki Horiguchi and Ryo Saito in a room and say, show us your booking plans, I want Dead or Alive through Kobe World 2020, and I want whatever the hell they were going to do with TN Revolucion from October of 2023 through however long they had planned. Those, I think, are the two things in Dragongate history at the top of my list of, man, what were they going to do?
Yeah. And I think that, like seeing the reaction and seeing some of the posts, like, not that it diminishes, like, the amount of hyperbolizing about this, that, like, I want to see the framework. I want to see where things were going with that before, like, do I think that this was, like, I've seen, like, can't miss people saying, like, oh yeah, he was like the one that those can't miss people. He was around for 2 weeks. It's hard to say like this, though. He, like, had, like, such a aberration to me that I wanted to know how it was going to play out. I would like what was, maybe not the booking sheet, how were the units going to look like in January going into Yokohama? I want to know, like, show me what the lineup was for that show and how things changed. Like, were we going to have Mante win in the way that he did? Or were we more looking about, like, hey, you have 3 big Yokohama natives here. Like, how are you going to base the card around that? I'd be fascinated to see that.
I do think it's worth saying, even with the caveat of, look, this guy was, he wrestled future matches, he went to Mexico, and then he was around for a month in Dragongate. The hype around him was real. It was to me, he was less evolved as an in-ring performer. It was more the charisma it was, not to steal a line from Enzo, but you can't teach that. Revolucion had an X Factor sort of deal the moment he walked through those doors in Cork and Hall, and it was obvious and it was apparent, and I was glued to the TV, obviously for Corkin, but for all the house show matches on YouTube that he worked as well. Up through, the sickening part of it is his career ended on a stomp. He stomped a guy, shredded his knee, never to be seen again. It's awful. It is absolutely awful.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, like, the way that he went down and the way that was like the freak and the way that it went quiet. It went very, very quiet. I remember for a while, the biggest answer I would get is, waiting for like multiple opinions. And usually with that kind of injury, at least through like pro sports, and maybe because we're exposed to so many of those injuries, if you watch stuff like football or hockey or stuff like that, you're just like, oh, when you get to like kind of this point, we still haven't heard anything, kind of expect the worst. And I just kind of like look at it with someone who like let's put like Revolution's wrestling career in context, because where I could see why someone had his point, even with the freaky charisma and the idea that the promotion was going to make things about him, and he was going to be such a big player.
Because you got to remember his size too. He was a full-blown heavyweight.
Right, he was a full-blown heavyweight whose favorite wrestler was Ricochet.
Yeah,
2014 Ricochet, to be clear. So it was something where like you have him do the future matches, and before they announced the debut, they said like, oh, he will be debuting in Toryumon Casa, and then you don't hear a single thing about the guy for basically a year, other than him appearing on random IWRG matches. Like, it is something where like, hey, if I was Nishikawa in that kind of position at his age, entering wrestling already as an adult, I kind of can get the idea of being like, man, do I want to go through this all again just to get back to this one point here? And I might be 30 or it's like 32, and this is not a promotion that waits for the old man here. It makes sense to me in a way.
Yeah, because he's 27 years old now. That was always the thing with him was he, you think about the Dragongate guys that come in and they're 18, 19 in the dojo, they debut by 20. He was 25, and it is now, heading down the barrel of 27. You got to think about it like a professional athlete, and it's not a star player, not somebody that had built-in equity to where, if this injury happened to Yamato, let's say, at that point in Yamato's career, when Yamato was that age, he already had some built-in equity. He was going to come back with a push, and I guess that was what was always, my thought process was that maybe Nishikawa had that. But it's a tough thing to be 27 and to have a shredded knee. That's not an easy thing to come back from, and I think he realized that. Real quick, I think we have to talk about it. I sent out a tweet on the Open the Voice Gate account today, and there was definitely a small conversation around it of what I will deem the shocking legacy of Toryumon Casa and the results of those excursions of La Estrella, Takuma Fujiwara, Takumi Nishikawa, SB Kento, and let's throw in Junta Miyawaki from Pro Wrestling Noah. I would score that like a 1.5 out of 5 because Junta, believe it or not, is still an active wrestler, and Estrella is active in North America, not Japan. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, and like, I think like the overall idea for Toryumon Casa now in retrospect was clearly like, all right, we're just going to like send them down there. They'll be at someone's house. It's just like now, like with like the benefit of hindsight, this like is just, other than like the people that like were like the idea of what happens after these 5 guys, there was like, what benefit was there to have this experiment in the first?
I mean, I understand Dragongate wanting to get back to Mexico and wanting to establish some sort of footprint there, but it did not happen. I would have never predicted that we'd be in the situation with Kento and Fujiwara that we are in, and more on Kento later. I want to talk about him when we get to the cage match. Estrella is the one where it's like, I was talking about this in the Voices of Wrestling Slack today. Estrella's really happy. I mean, everybody I talked to on the North American side and the Dragongate side, they're all like, yeah, he loves what he's doing. And Mike, you'll remember this. I mean, I advocated as soon as he was getting shipped off, I said he should just be Ultimo's North American personal assistant. And if you book Ultimo, you also get La Estrella. They can tag together. They get, if Ultimo wants to work a singles, you put Estrella in the opener. That should be his future. And I would argue what Estrella is doing now is far more beneficial to him than being one guy in an 8-man tag match on every Dragongate opening match. If he's in Japan now, he's just young Kenichiro Arai.
Yeah, and it's something where kind of, in a way, La Estrella and Torimon Casa, sometimes Ultimo doesn't have great ideas. And it was like, when he left Estrella, my hope was like, okay, this guy's going to be able to figure himself out here, because the high-flying purple supernova was dead on arrival. It wasn't very over.
The high-flying purple supernova was a grappler by heart that was forced to be a high flyer.
A nationally ranked grappler at heart. So, like, it's very hard for me to think like that there was any sort of expectation when everyone was like, oh yeah, Estrella's going to go, and he left in 2022, and everyone just seems content with this. And it's like, oh yeah, you can keep you're in Dragongate. Yeah, no, you're still a part of us, even though it's something where it's on paper and in paperwork kind of thing. Like it just worked out, but I don't think there was any expectation. Like La Estrella, like in 2022 when he was going, and when we were like, oh, okay, he was gone here, we kind of were like, all right, we'll see what happens from here.
The fact that La Estrella is living in North America and will appear to be living in North America for some more time, that's the least shocking thing in the history of Torimon Casa. Doesn't shock me at all.
I mean, the most shocking thing is the fact that he is the one who still has the Dragongate affiliation. Frankly.
I know. Look, I would not have guessed we'd be in the situation that we're in, but
but because really my expectation in a way would have been like kind of ending not what happened with Kubune and Fujiwara, to be clear, but I kind of expected there would have been a point where he just was going to go independent, and there might have been like a 2-week thing about it. But no, he's still it's worked out great for La Estrella, and I just hope that like next time he comes in to renew his visa, we get to see some fun grappling, and then he gets his Brave Gate shot and he goes away.
Last year was last May. He came over for that Hokkaido triple shot. It could happen any moment now. I'm surprised he didn't do it, on the plane back from Mania weekend. I thought maybe they would have snuck him in then, but if the timeline matches up the way it did last year, Estrella should be back in Japan relatively soon.
Yeah, I wonder about that because of how everything is getting more complicated with visas lately.
Yeah, he did end of May through World last year, and quite honestly, that was great.
Most I liked him in Dragongate.
By the time World came around, it was like, all right, off to Mexico you go, my friend. I will see you later. And I was perfectly happy with it.
That was the closest thing, Case, I could say to like a verbal high five on the way out the door that I've ever heard.
My man, all right. You work at IWRG? I'll check it out. Cubs fans, send me the link. Until then, my friend, I will catch you on the flippity flip. It's like, all right, we're good. You're working at Chicago Indy? I'd love to stop by. It's what La Estrella is. It doesn't bother me. Let's also, real quick, before we talk about Dead or Alive, and we will get there in just a second, the list of young boy retirees post OWE split. So everybody post Kotoka, and I guess, did OG Shiba retire and then come out of retirement, or just leave?
He left. He got deleted.
Okay, I couldn't remember if he had retired and then came out of retirement. But anyways, the names...
he was spotted at a Tenryu project show the last couple of weeks ago.
He's fine. It's
the last number of 60 seconds.
I think he would be a far worse wrestler if he didn't have some sort of Dragongate background. That is the most in-depth analysis of OG Shiba that I can give.
Yeah, and we will see if either him or his brother does better in their post-Dragongate kind of thing,
Well, his brother's crushing it.
Well, he's doing an MMA fight.
Yeah, that's not. Kotoka is doing an MMA fight. That's not good.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
That was my point of comparison case. No, he's sponsoring the apron. He's throwing them money. Like in a way, he kind of wins. Like, and I feel like that's another thing, not to completely get back to Revolution, to think about. Add in the fact that Dragongate and the economy right now, if you are in your late 20s coming back from an injury like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But
good point.
Yeah, it's something where, like, yeah, OG, it's worked out kind of for him. But man, I remember like in early COVID thinking that we were going to get OG versus Jimmy as an undercard.
So the guys that have retired in this new era of Dragon Gate, it's Sora Fujikawa, who debuted alongside Madoka Kakuta, empty arena debut match. I actually just recently watched that back as well. It was Kakuta and Fujikawa versus SB Kento, then Kento Kabune, and then Taketo Kame. And he wrestled for a few months during the pandemic. I thought he looked really good. And then on a house show, he wrestled Masaki Mochizuki in a singles match. Mochi just roundhouse kicked him in the jaw, and he was never the same. That was another guy that I just expected to be back. And then if you remember, he had already graduated beyond being like a dark match, right? He had debuted before the future class became a thing. Mm. But when he came back from injury, they relegated him to future matches. So those exhibition, green tights, black tights matches, and he did a few of those, and it was quite honestly a lot like watching Nagano towards the end, where you just go, oh, this guy's not into this. He grew out his facial hair. He didn't look very good. He retired. Riki Ihashi, who was, my preferred of the two Ihashi brothers, he left wrestling to go pursue other interests. That seems like we all have those guys in life that every time you check up on them, if you talk to them once every 6 months, they're always doing something new. That has been the career and the life of Riki Ihashi. Last I heard, he was a competitive bodybuilder. I'm sure that'll change in the next 6 months. There was Shoya Sato, who everybody will tell you the victory for his career is the fact that he debuted. Nobody expected him to have a long career, but man, he was fun while he was around. And then you have Revolucion, and you have Nagano. I will note real quick before I throw it back to you, the public response for Revolucion and Nagano from every wrestler on the roster that I've seen outside of Yoshiki Kato, who tweeted something in character, has been, good luck, these guys are family, I wish them the best, which was a very similar sentiment for Riki Ihashi and Shoya Sato. Sora Fujikawa, I don't think left on bad terms, but he is sort of the dark horse in this one, the one that maybe didn't get the flowers out of the door, let's say.
Yeah, and it is something where I look at Sato and Ihashi, and it is something like, for me, and Case and I are looking at the same spreadsheet right now. I got very bored one day at work and basically made a spreadsheet where I put everyone in their class and in their eras, and we have basically 9 eras that we're talking about. And the thing that this very much kind of reminds me were some of the growing pains into next with this, where you had people like Lupin Matsutani and Koji Shishido, who some of them were older than others and they just did not stick around. And it feels like that, in a way, the fact that everything has changed to having things and having guys now more do exhibition matches on tour again, and not having it based around Sanctuary or Lapis Hall, I feel like there's more kind of exposure to it. And I feel like that kind of colors the perspective too.
I will make the argument, and perhaps you can steer me in another direction, but I think this much turnover is just normal for Dragon Gate. You think about maybe the perception is different just because the original 5 guys lasted as long as they did, but you had a lot of T2P guys fall by the wayside, either in Mexico or shortly after they got back to Japan. Obviously, Toriyama X, that whole class outside of Kagetora and briefly Naoki Tanizaki, they went by the wayside. They all split in their different ways. It's not like you and I are waxing poetically about Yuki Ono or, like you said, Lupin Matsutani or Koji Shoshida. This things happen in generations. We lost an entire class of guys with Yohei and Kenshin Chikano and Kazushi Harada. These guys just don't last up through Takahiro Yamamura and Katsumi Takashima in the late 2010s into now. I think this is unfortunately very common, but I don't look at this as a new problem for Dragongate, and I think some people do, and I'm not sure. I guess it's a compliment in a way to Dragongate in the way that they train these guys, that people don't look at their dojo as being full of failures, whereas maybe they think of the Noah dojo in that way. But we're used to seeing guys go by the wayside. It's just a little less pronounced because, unlike Noah or All Japan primarily, and I don't say this to throw these promotions under the bus, I mean no ill will when I say this, but over the last 25 years, Dragongate has made more stars than either of those promotions.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on that point, Case, what we see more often than not, and it's the same case in All Japan, the same case in Noah, to their benefit. It's just the reality of this is, as fans and as people on the outside, you only get to see people who make it to a certain point. Case, how much do we hear about, like when we're talking to people in and around the company about like, oh, new intake class coming in, so-and-so had to go build some more bunk beds, we're having more kids in here. And it is something where like the fact that Dragongate turns out this many students is the fact that so many people want to train there, and we get to see, at least at the certain point, we get to see the closing lap of a 1600 meters, and we don't get to see lap 1 or lap 2 or lap 3, and it is something that I think that colors the perspective, and it's so much the case in Dragongate as it would be for Pro Wrestling No, and as it would be for All Japan. But I think the thing that we've kind of seen with Dragongate, as you're saying, is that we are looking right now at a spreadsheet of conservatively 120 people that the Dragon system has produced since the Noah split. And you are probably looking at 15 to 20 in the other direction.
To your point, to put a bow on this, I mean, the hardcore Dragongate fan in Japan is not a fan of DDT because they look at DDT as all of the Dragongate young boys that weren't good enough to be in Dragongate. That's the perception there. So yeah, they continue to filter these kids in and out. You and I have said it numerous times. The rest of Japan has slowly started to adapt to the way that Dragongate produces talent, lessening restrictions in their dojo. I know I took a beating for part of this because I was misconstrued, unfortunately, but New Japan very publicly gave a press conference about a year and a half ago where they were it was actually a year ago because it was right after the Reiwa Generation promo, where they were like, all right, guys, we need to get younger. We are going to accept shorter guys and lighter guys, and we need to speed up this process. And everything they did echoed the way that Dragongate develops talent. So, they lose a lot of guys, but they continue to gain a lot as well.
Yeah, the people who came down on you, Case, did not, they neglected to look at what like the average height for a Japanese teenager is versus the New Japan intake height.
Well, and also, and not to beat a dead horse, but I'm still fucking annoyed by it because because New Japan, I don't remember if it was a promo or a press release or whatever it was, but they were talking about Umino and Tsuji and Narita, and they were referring to them as the Reiwa generation. And this is very shortly after this press conference where they were very obviously, and it's not an insult to New Japan, they should be doing this. You and I complained about them not doing this for years, where they very obviously cribbed some notes from the way Dragongate develops talent. And it was about a week after Dragongate said, we are doing a Reiwa generation storyline. Here are our guys. And New Japan called them the Reiwa Musketeers, and I fired off a tweet, and unfortunately the dumbest people online found it, and I still have to deal with that to this day. They didn't get that I wasn't insinuating that Dragongate didn't invent the Musketeers. I understand that's New Japan's thing. Dragongate got to the Reiwa stuff before New Japan did. And
New Japan, if you watch stuff like All Together, they're still really, trying to get that on track.
Not everybody is Yota Tsuji. Let me just say that.
Oh boy. We could that there's another place that I can give my all together. I'll leave that at that case. But we've gone already half an hour without talking about the first of the traditional Dragongate Big Five shows that have happened in 2024, Dead or Alive 2024 from Nagoya. Boy, I think we just had to start with the cage match and everything that has come out after it. We saw in a 5-way steel cage survival match, Shun Skywalker, KZ, Jackie Funky Kamei, Jason Lee, and Hio. Man, we saw we were all trying to figure out what was going to happen, and instead what we did not see coming was KZ understanding the bond between Hio and Kamei.
I think we got to go guy by guy here and just talk about everybody, let's say in the order that they escaped in, which means we start with Jackie Funky Kamei. And I mean, what can be said? You know, he just continues to win. He wins as a performer time after time. I think the two best wrestlers in the world are Bryan Danielson and Will Ospreay. I think the most complete wrestler on earth right now is Shun Skywalker. And then in both of those categories, I think Jackie Funky Kamei is behind them, but he is the next in line. You know, it is remarkable what he is able to do. This was his first cage match. You would have thought he had been wrestling in these his entire life, the way that he just adapted to the environment, the spots that he was involved in. It was all just magnificent.
It was something where I think that you list Kamei with Danielson and Ospreay, and with the exception, I feel like, of the storytelling with the Tiger Driver 91 and where that's going to with that, I don't think that either of them have told as a emotionally complete and compelling story as Kamei did in this match this year. It was, for at least for me, and for a company that hears way too often by people who should know better, oh, this isn't your dad's Dragongate. This company, you know, like, people say they do the same things, but I'm not saying like the guys around and all of that. No, Jackie Funky Kamei delivered one of the top 5 Dragongate cage performances of all time, and had an emotionally affecting moment that basically, in a way, has been doing the exact same thing that this company has done for 25 years. Do very satisfying emotional wrestling and do it better than anyone else in the world. And I think that we have to finally look at Jackie Funky Kamei and admit that he might be one of the most complete storytellers, if not the most complete storyteller in wrestling today. And that was solely through, like, if you just entered this match just without the backstory with it, I feel like it was compelling enough as is.
I mean, Kamei, I would say he's violently Dragongate. You know, the through line of the charisma of a Masato Yoshino to an Akira Tozawa to a Jackie Funky Kamei is there. You know, it's like I said a few weeks ago, where I don't understand how you can like Michinoku Pro but not Dragongate. It's an era, you know, even though he's in a different era, you can't not like one era of this company and then not respect what Kamei does as well, because he is just, you know, at one point we were saying he's the new Genki Horiguchi. With all due respect to Genki, I think Kamei has a far higher ceiling at this point in his career than Horiguchi ever had. He just continues to go up level after level. The interesting thing will be, by the time we talk next week, one, there will be a Cork and Hall show that we'll preview at the very end of this episode, and something doesn't smell right on that Cork, and I feel like we're getting a big angle on that show as well. But also, the larger wrestling media will hopefully be paying attention to this show. I talked to Dave yesterday. Dave has a you know, a million things to watch this week, but he wants to watch this show. He's going to try to watch this show. Don't give Dave shit if he doesn't watch this show, because he's going to try to get to it. I talked to Joe Lanza today. Joe hasn't watched any Dragon Gate this year. He's trying to catch up on Dragon Gate with some links I sent him, and then obviously watch this show. The hope is that by the time we talk next week, Mike, that the larger wrestling community has a much higher awareness of the greatness of Jackie Funky Kamei. Because he is having, I mean, I'm looking at my spreadsheet right now. I've got 11 Kamei matches at 4 stars or higher, where it's May 7th. You know, what are we doing here?
And up until a month ago, prohibitive tag team of the year person. Jackie
I still think I think Kung Fu Masters, unless like the Bucks start ripping off some classics, they're going to be my tag team of the year just from the Rey de Pareja stuff in the Bayside match. That is all told like 7 phenomenal tag team matches. And quite honestly, in 2024, tag team wrestling sucks. I don't know if anybody else can beat that.
I mean, there'll be people that say that like Bishamon had matches.
No, I'm not. I'm not falling for that again.
It's 2024. We're not falling for your Yoshihashi based propaganda anymore.
I gotta be honest, even if that's the selling point, now that they're not wrestling Aussie Open, I'm probably not running to New Japan World to watch a 4-star Bishamon match that's like 4th from the top on Dominion. That's not the selling point that it once was.
But they might face off against TMTK.
Man, Shane Haste is a guy. Talk about, you know, T and Revolucion, the potential he had there. I would like to run Shane Haste's career back in a dramatic way and tell him to avoid NXT at all costs. And boy, what could have been.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, Jackie Funky Kame. Mike, look, I gotta give you credit. This was your guy all along. I think to some degree he's maybe even surprised you with the fact that his ceiling continues to raise, but I did this about 6 months ago. I'll do it again here. I got to throw it to you to take a victory lap.
Well, I think the thing about Jackie Funky Kame, and as you put it, like, even I underestimated this guy. Like, when I saw Takedo Kame in 2019 as a guy in very baggy, like, turtle print tights, I was like, oh, this guy seems like fun. And for me, for a rookie in Dragongate case, you could pretty much like list off what's the easiest way for me to adopt you as my guy. So if you're kind of undersized and you do one thing very funny. Mm-hmm. And for Kame, he was a yeller, and that really got my attention. But it is something where you kind of, in a way where, and we'll talk about the point of comparison between him and Kabune in a second, but he was not the one that they were ready to present early. This was not a piece of meat you toss on the grill, you sear it for 3 minutes on both sides, and it's ready to go. This is a brisket. This is something that you go low and slow, and that's what you kind of look at Takedo Kame, Jackie Funky Kame's career, if you look at the last 5 years, where I've talked about this for a lot of times, that how do you go low and slow with a guy like this? Well, you take a look at his strengths, you take a look at what you're dealing with, and you try to find out. In Dragongate, with the way that they tour and the way that they kind of, in a way, when you debut, you're not done training. Like, you do have a way where, like, if you get into a unit, then you're like traveling around with the unit, and there's more learning that happens there. Well, you go and you take Kame, you put him right next to KZ and Genki Horiguchi. And from that, like, I'll be completely honest, Case, I still thought his ceiling at a certain point was going to be Bravegate.
Of course.
But now we're at this point here where we're talking that, like, now coming out of this match, I don't think that this is going to happen, but we're a week away from saying, like, how do we get Kame versus Mante for Dreamgate?
Well, this is Monte's problem, and we can circle back to this. But Mante, who I think has been a good, not great Dreamgate champion, but I think objectively a good champion. Great match with Skywalker, great match with Susumu, great appearances in Rey de Parejas. The problem with him is that he is now the 3rd most over guy in a unit of 3 people, and that is through no fault of his own. But he is linked up with Hyo and Kame, who could not be hotter.
Yeah, because you have basically, when you watch this show, if you're someone who waits, listens to VoiceGate, then goes and watches the show, I had a moment when I looked over to my fiance, like, on Sunday morning, saying, like, all right, it looks like that there is about a half an hour left, or an hour left on this. We're getting to the main event. There's got to be like something that will happen there. But when you basically have like the crux of the last 15 minutes of a show be based around Takedo Kame, Jackie Funky Kame desperately not wanting to cut Hyo's hair, and Hyo bringing his arm up and basically doing the thing. It's like, oh, I'll guide your hand into like shaving my head, and then afterwards KZ being struck in by the moment, go like, no, you know what, you need to go to Big Hud. Your time in Natural Vibes is over, you're graduated, but save us the last dance. Like they've based the essentially an hour of one of their biggest shows of their year around Takedo Kamei, and that's not to mention the fact that business-wise, very successful weekend for Dragongate.
Great house, absolutely. You know, I mean, still about 1,000 less than Dead or Alive 2019 pre-pandemic, but you know, unfortunately, that's kind of right where everybody is. You know, if you're doing 1,000 less than you were 5 years ago, that seems like a win now. And this was definitely a win compared to what I thought was a disappointing number last year, where they just barely cleared what they did in 2022. So 2022, you still had attendance restrictions. 2023, you did not. And I think they did about 100 more people last year for Skywalker Kakuta than they did the year prior. This was about 1,000 more people than 2022. Like I said, and about 1,000 less than what they did in 2019. So a big win there. By all accounts, everybody was satisfied with this number.
Yeah, and I think that everyone in Nagoya, the overwhelming story was what's going to happen with Kamei in the cage match. It was all devoted from it. It was going to be like, oh, we have Shun Skywalker thinking that Kamei is eventually going to join Z-Brats, and, you know, because Shun Skywalker thinks everyone's going to join him. You have Jason Lee, who is just really devoted to the idea of, screw Jackie Funky Kamei, I'm not your stepping stone, and I'm going to make you pay for that. You have KZ, basically, in a way, everyone's eyes were on KZ, thinking like, maybe, you know, it's a time for KZ to move on and turn there. And then Hyo, the guy who stepped in and said, you know what, I will get in there because I want to defend your honor, Jackie Funky Kamei. This house was built on Jackie Funky Kamei, and it was probably the most successful house out of a very disappointing Golden Week for elsewhere in the industry. Dragongate's one of the few companies I feel like that can, I don't think they're going to be popping champagne, but they're going to be out at drinks after the show going like, all right, we did all right here. That's not being said very often in Japan coming out of Golden Week.
It wasn't popping champagne. I do think Saito probably exchanged a firm handshake with Anthony W. Mori, and Mori said, good work, boss. I think that's the level that it was.
And then ripped a fat cloud, like that.
Look, you're exactly right. And I think the attendance, quite honestly, was earned. I think this is momentum they've had really ever since Bayside, especially with Kamei in particular, that they're now seeing pay off in a big way. And although SB Kento hasn't wrestled in Dragongate since July of 2022, it was literally a year ago where you and I found out that he wasn't going to be returning to the company. And I think the last 12 months of these guys' career has to be analyzed. And I always get a little sensitive and paranoid when we talk Glate that I don't have a dog in this fight. Trust me. I wish Glate was a better promotion than it is. I would love it if that promotion was thriving. It's not, objectively, and we have to analyze it. But I think it's really worth noting, like you said, Kento was this ready-made star who, like Jay said 2 years ago on this podcast, and it sent chills up my spine when he said it, if he was a few inches taller, he would have been Dreamgate champion by now, and that was in 2022. And it was true. I always said he was Japanese Adam Cole. The charisma that he has is going to take him to the top. Imagine if he was a few inches taller. Kamei was not that guy. And it has to be noted and appreciated and said that it is so incredibly impressive that his rapid ascent from mid-carder to upper mid-carder, and then objectively upper mid-carder to main eventer, which is where Jackie Funky Kamei absolutely sits in the pecking order right now. He has done that without his built-in generational rival at play, without his BB Hulk to his Shingo Takagi, without his Ben K to his Shun Skywalker, without his Shima to his Magnum, however you want to chalk it up. The story of Kamei's career up through this time last year was always going to be defined by whatever else SB Kento was doing. Dragongate basically said that. Like, look, it's Kento's world, we're just living in it, and Kamei is always going to be analyzed by the success of SB Kento and where he fits in afterwards. the fact that he has done what he has done without Kento in the picture is utterly remarkable, because there's a real world scenario here where with all the chaos in Dragongate, all the guys leaving up and down the card, all these changes, whatever, Kame could have been lost in the shuffle so easily. I mean, we could be talking about Kame wrestling Daiki Yanagiuchi in a dark match on this show had things gone awry. And it felt like, even though Kame was extremely talented, that was a real possibility, because all we knew was analyzing him through the lens of Kento. And the fact that he has survived that, and you look at the last 12 months that he's had compared to, quite honestly, and again, I say this with no bias, I wish Kento was crushing it, but the sad 12 months that SB Kento has had, Kame was going to be good no matter what, but the fact that he is this good given this scenario is utterly remarkable.
And I mean, like, here's another way of looking at it. Not only is Kame, like, he has this rapid ascent, you now, in over the last 12 months, or let's even string it out even further, Case, in the 22 months since Kento Kobune had a match in Dragongate, that is a significant passage of time in the promotion like this. For those who aren't necessarily a week in, week out Dragongate follower, there's turnover. That we are now like in a world where there's probably a good portion of that audience right now that never saw SBK wrestle in Dragongate. Because, and you know, it's like the real liberating thing in a way for Kame is this, like, now as he gets to like now, like, we're like moving past this point of comparison, he's been able to transcend this point of comparison. Guess what they've kind of lucked into in a way with him? Perhaps a better generational rival in Jason Lee, because the whole aspect of the SBK and Kame rivalry was the fact that Kobune was so far ahead of Kame, and that was just, how could Kame ever catch up with him? The big, and in retrospect, a real brutal line to be given in a promo of, like, remember when we were in the dojo, you had the bottom up, always looking up at me. I don't plan on that changing. Well, guess what? One of them is walking into the 25th anniversary of Dragongate and is the feature player right now.
He's the hottest guy in the company.
And the other one is a added member on a GLATE house show that does 200.
It's unbelievable. In terms of the in-ring stuff from Kame here, I got to mention a few spots. One, it's in my review, the GIF of it, because Joe Gagney luckily made a GIF of it. Kame walking up, or running up rather, the plank that was laid against the ring post. I've never seen that before. I doubt anybody will ever use a plank like that again in a wrestling ring. That was remarkable. And then the spot that everybody's talking about, which was Hyo sacrificing himself really for the second time in the match and taking Skywalker and Lee down with him, jumping off the top rope, which catapulted Kame up the cage as he was, I don't know the words to describe this. The spot in which Kame escaped.
It was a pulley system.
It was like 7th grade science class. It was like an experiment you would do there, but with a human body.
Physics.
Yeah. It was physics 101 with Jackie Funky Kame, and it worked. And I can't believe that it worked. It's just phenomenal stuff.
That is because, and we'll get into him in a bit, when the guy who is devoted to protect you is the big brain and has perhaps the best rookie Dragongate cage performance of all time, you're going to have great spots like that. I love the Terry Funk board spinning thing that Kame did.
I like that he got crazy with it. It was a true Terry Funk tribute spot because he whacked his own partner.
It was fantastic, but it was something where, like, I think that in a way, when we talk about like the Dragongate cage match and the way it kind of operates, you found new ways to make that happen. And I think like the real focal point of that, and in a lot of ways, I mean, taking it back to physics, the real lever behind everything happening in this match was Kame and getting out first, because Hyo really loves the pulley system when you did the 5 basic machines part of physics class.
The last thing I'll say about Kamei is something that I've said before, but I think it's worth noting in regards to this match, especially after what you just said, because I think you're right. His legacy is turning into that I think is very similar to something that Bryan Danielson has, which is how many guys in wrestling can say they had their best match of their lives against Danielson. You know, everything is better when Kamei's around and Kamei's involved, and I just think the longer we go, the more it's going to be true, where we're going to look back on this era and, you know, recall Mante's best match and Jason's best match and Shun's best match, and, you know, some lower card guys we'll mention as well, and we go, well, you know, what was the best thing they did? Well, it was probably going to be something against Jackie Funky Kamei, and I just think that is absolutely remarkable.
Oh, absolutely. So Kamei, first one out, got out with the most inventive way. Whenever you see a rope in a Dragongate cage match, you know something's up.
I thought they were going to hang him. You know, they made a noose, and I thought they might kind of Big Boss Man style, like, try to hang him off the side of the cage for a second. I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. It luckily wasn't that violent, and turns out way more fun with what they did with that rope.
Case, have you ever played an Assassin's Creed game?
No, I have not.
Well, there is a system like that in Assassin's Creed where you're able to, like, shoot up the top of a building by, like, hitting, like, it's like something like masonry wise, you go flying up straight up, and I was like, oh, that's the Assassin's Creed thing. Okay, that's sweet. I really enjoyed that. Well, someone who was out next right after him had a special escape of his own. Shun Skywalker got out, saved his mask by stepping over KZ to climb up the cage, like literally just putting his foot on his shoulder going, yep, I am taking this flag now.
Shun's unbelievable. I mean, he's just so good. You know, I think everything he does right now, it's interesting. I have this question in our notes, and I want to ask it to you very directly here. Is Shun Skywalker underpushed in Dragongate right now?
I think there's the issue that he is a heel, and that makes things so different with how Dragongate is and how they book in a way that, like, you can't always have the heel be so super on top, or you start getting the Takagi backlash.
So, God, I love you, because this is what I want to talk about. You know,
the Takagi, we're talking about 2015 and 2024. Let's do it.
Well, you know, I'm still very much against the way that Mante won the belt at Final Gate. I thought it was rushed. I thought it was silly. Maybe it was a TN Revolucion impact that we're unaware of, but I don't like the way Mante got the belt, and I don't like that he beat Shun in his first defense, even if the match was great. I am so hell-bent on Skywalker winning the Dreamgate Championship again and immediately. To me, without a shadow of a doubt, the Kobe World Main Event should be Mante versus Shun, and Shun should win. And that is largely by way of the fact that, one, look, everything in this company revolves around Shun right now. The story of Casey, the story of Strong Machine J. You've got whatever's going on with Jason. You got whatever's going on with Jackie. You got all these different things. You know, Yoshioka, when he comes back, has history with Shun. Ben and him, classmates. Kikuchi has his story. Exactly. It all revolves around Shun, and that is a good thing. If you put the Dreamgate belt on him at World, you've got every main event on every big show set for the rest of the year, and you don't even have to think about it. You've got Shun versus Strong Machine J. You've got Shun versus Jackie. You've got Shun versus Hyo. You've got Shun versus Strong Machine J. I'm still waiting. It's been 5 years now since the last Shun versus Mochi singles match. They've never wrestled in a singles match with Shun as a heel. I am still waiting on that. You could rifle through this roster with ready-made, obvious, baked-in story Dreamgate matches with Shun, and the difference between he and Takagi is Shun plays the game. Shun is Dragongate, and that's not by any means to besmirch Shingo Takagi. I obviously think he's incredible and was in Dragongate. I've never fully bought into the Takagi backlash thing in the way that others have, but it's important to note, like, when Okuda won the Bravegate belt, right? We talked about this. Okuda was able to do Keisuke Okuda's match up through winning the Bravegate belt. And then he got the title, and Dragongate challenged him and tried to have him do Dragongate things, to have him come across lighter, to have him come across funnier, to have him come across more versatile. And he failed and he got fired. And, Okuda's not doing anything relevant now. Shun is a heel and he's a dominant heel and he wins, but he's not the gym class bully that Shingo Takagi was. Nothing that he does comes across as harsh or as abrasive as it did with Takagi, and I thought that was a strength with Shingo. I am all for that. I would run that back in a heartbeat. There's a different energy with Shun. It feels more authentic to this company, and I think they are making a huge mistake. All due respect to Mante, who again has been a good but not great champion. All due respect to anybody that thinks it's their turn in line. To me, it is so obvious that there is money and intrigue and a long-term Shun Skywalker Dreamgate run, and I am ready for it, and I'm ready for it now.
Now, I said I was not going to talk about Altogether, but I need to talk about Altogether as it pertains to Shun case.
Please.
So, I ended up buying Altogether. I am glad that my money is going to go to Noto, it's an archipelago, Peninsula, disaster relief. I'm okay with that, but I just kind of got to a point where it's like, all right, I'm buying this thing. And Shun was in the main event of a very failed Budokan show, and it was something that it was kind of stark where you had this main event with Shota Umino, with Kaito Kiyomiya, with Yuya Uemura, with Yuki Ueno, with Konosuke Takeshita, and you had Shun Skywalker there. A lot of people walking in with hardware, and Shun was the one not with hardware. And in a match where it was very much a match that was told like Takesha as the monster, but the second line was, oh, Shun is kind of the straw that stirs the drink in this match. It's happening elsewhere that Shun Skywalker is the ambassador of Dragongate. There's a reason why he was in that main event. And it makes more sense than not that with United Japan's going to continue being a thing, that Shun Skywalker being like one of the major parts of it, at least from a Dragon Gate perspective, you might want to put the belt on the guy to be out there.
And to protect him, because if he's a guy surrounded by guys with belts and he doesn't have one, politically he might lose that fight. And I would not want anybody outside of Dragon Gate pinning Shun Skywalker right now. Quite honestly, there's not a lot of guys in Dragon Gate that I think should be pinning him right now. This is not the Shun show. This is Kame and this is Hyo and later Naruki Doi Spotlight. But again, absolutely delivered in another main event. And if he doesn't win the Dreamgate belt soon, I'm going to give it until the end of the calendar year. Either he wins the Dreamgate belt later this year and we do 8 years of Shun Skywalker and I really break down the history of this guy's career and where he lands in the Dragon Gate pecking order and possibly the Dragon Gate Mount Rushmore. If not, we'll do it in December. Because I've said all along, I want to marinate with this year and really figure out by the end of it where he fits historically in this company. And every opportunity he gets, he continues to impress me.
Absolutely. So Shun Skywalker keeps his mask. He had a special all blue gear with a masquerade variant entrance mask for this. I thought he looked really cool.
It was badass.
It is something where like Shun, I like his mask. We're now enabling his mask addiction. Like he's got.
Well, at least he's a main eventer now. I was worried about his mask addiction when he was working opening 6-man tags. It was like, oh, he's got new gear again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of Shun, he is a facet of the third escape. We're down to KZ, Hyo, and Jason Lee. Strong Machine J comes out wearing his old mask, the black and silver one. He has a metal cookie sheet. It's, I think, usually Kai's that has. He fakes out Shun to free KZ. Third escape, KZ is free. Strong Machine J firmly in natural vibes going forward.
Man, I'm afraid to break down anything with KZ because it could all be irrelevant by this Cork and Hall show. Because I think something is up with vibes there. I can't tell. KZ has a tremendous challenge ahead of him, which is going into now the fourth incarnation of Natural Vibes. How does he take this unit back? Because the prior two incarnations, I think, can be defined, or the last one, rather, can really be defined by Jason and Jackie, and it felt like it was no longer KZ's unit, no fault of his own. He was just dealing with two world-class wrestlers, and now he has the attention again. And Strong Machine Jay's hot, and it could very easily become a thing where Strong Machine Jay overtakes him. I don't know what's going to happen here, but KZ and Strong Machine Jay very much an enjoyable angle here in the cage match.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think this match, if we're going to talk nuts and bolts, I don't put this up there with 2011 or 2016. Like,
those are the two I would have ahead of it.
Yeah.
As well. I'm always partial. I think the 2020 cage is really underrated, but I think
that one.
I do. I really do. But I think this one was better.
In a bathrobe, and that
helps. It helps. It's an emotional Shimizu performance, and I think Shimizu was excellent there. But this was better than 2020.
Yeah, but I think if we're talking about a steel cage survival match, there's certain things we have to like check off the list for it to be in the conversation, right? Like, we want to see some inventive escapes. We got that with Jackie Funky Kamei right off the bat. We want to see some brutal brawling. We can talk about those later. I mean, that plank really did some work there. But one of the key things about a Dragongate steel cage survival match is unit stakes and will they or won't they? And we got that, I felt like, in a very successful manner with the SMJ and KZ kind of storyline going up into this.
You know what was so interesting about the Strong Machine J stuff? And I think maybe I'm reading too much into this, but what I like about this, I think it shows that Dragongate's pretty dialed in with their audience right now, because when Strong Machine J hits the chop on KZ, it's not like there were thunderous boos. Like, that heel turn, if he would have straight turned heel there, I think it would have fallen flat. But the pop that he got when he did the double turn and hit Shun was one of the biggest reactions of the entire night. It was like the Twin Gate finish, and then obviously the Hyo and Kame stuff, but then the Strong Machine J thing was third. And maybe it's nothing, maybe it's something. I'm very glad they worked that out the way that they did, because the payoff, the final pop that Strong Machine J got there was just marvelous.
Yeah, it was something where, like, Strong Machine J to me is such an interesting person on the roster. And I feel like I've talked around this for a while, just because, like Shingo Takagi, he kind of is the point sticking out. You know, he's not saying it down in that way, but having him like incorporate and be a part of this and getting that kind of reaction is one of those things that's like, yeah, no, Jay is Dragongate, but even if it's the whole Strong Machine thing is a little bit on the outside looking in, it just was such a moment there. So think about all the things that he's done over the last 2 years to make him more authentic to this promotion. You know, I don't think Jay has the success that he has, as silly as this might sound, if he can't break dance, and if he doesn't fully embrace vibes, and if he doesn't start showing the charisma that he did. The 2019 version of Strong Machine J would never, ever reach the highs that Natural Vibe Strong Machine J has. No, absolutely not. And it's something where, like, you've now put the idea, and maybe Strong Machine J takes over Natural Vibe's leadership. You know, like, he's back breakdancing, and, you know, like, that's the thing with, if something's up with KZ, I feel like out of the other three guys, Jay's the one I want to see kind of in the leadership.
Here's the vibes conversation we can have before Korakuen.
Yeah, let's do it now. I feel like we've been talking around this.
Well, it's just, without getting into the specifics of the Hyo Kame Mante partnership, you know, if we could just focus on vibes for a second, are you at all worried that post Jason, post Jackie, post final dance in Aichi with Jackie, that when KZ fires up, you know, his entrance music in Korakuen Hall, and then Vibes headlines that show, and again, put an asterisk there because I feel like there might be an angle coming, is KZ now the guy that's graduated high school and is still wearing his varsity jacket? It feels like Vibes could have ended at Dead or Alive, and everybody would have been 100% satisfied. And Jay could have gone on to do his own thing, and Shimizu could have gone with Jay. UT is Teflon, he'll go wherever, and KZ could have gone to the old guys unit and probably been the star of that unit. And now we're going to do it again? We're going to keep on doing Vibes? Are you sure?
Yeah, it is something where I think that there is now, like, if we were going to do TSA alert system case, like if we're going to do Homeland Security, we're bringing back the color scales here.
I was going to say, is this the Axis of Evil?
No. We're just going to bring back threat levels. We're just going to do the threat levels.
All right. I follow.
I think like instantly we've gone threat level red on KZ turning. Like I think that it's something where like everything like vibe wise, not natural vibe wise, but like vibe wise, doesn't it kind of like in a way you look at that threesome and they said like KZ will do this without you, and you're kind of like at a point here where it's just like, what are you going to bring up Daiki? It doesn't make sense in natural vibes at this point. Like I feel like we're kind of like, as you're saying, like what are we doing here?
So is your thought process that KZ's going to turn heel?
I just think like, 'cause I know KZ's not in the Dragongate match. Like
he's not. It's KZ versus Kame in a singles match, and then Shimizu, UT, and Strong Machine J against the Vibes trio that holds the Z-Brats trio that holds the Final Gate belts.
Yeah, I just kind of like, there's a part of me that like I can just see how they can just like do that turn, and I think in a way everything with Z-Brats is at a point where they're old. They've crossed 2 years. That's the point where you should be looking at the babyface roster and wondering who's going to be the big turn to kick off the new one. And I think that can be KZ.
It's tough. You know, I don't want Vibes existing without KZ in it. I think that would be very foolish. That just seems like it would be a mess to me. My thought was more so something coming in the main event where maybe UT turns heel. I know that's been talked about a bunch. And that KZ does the thing that maybe you would advise not doing, which is add Daiki, add Fuda. Maybe I'm looking at the roster right now. And there's
really over generation real quick.
I know. That's the danger they fall into here, and maybe they just weren't ready for the reaction that Big Hug got and the seamlessness of Kame leaving that unit and joining Big Hug. But it feels like we're done with Vibes, you know. And I loved the third incarnation of this unit. One of the strongest units in the history of Dragongate. I feel very comfortable saying that. Classic matches, great look, memorable moments. They have it all. I don't know where you go from here. You lost the two guys that were the heart and soul of this unit, and it needs something, because it can't just be KZ, Shimizu, UTJ. I love those guys. If they were those four guys in a unit with different branding, I'd be all for it. But this can't be Vibes going forward. It just can't. Yeah, if you keep it at 4, then the countdown clock to a disbands match has to be started. I feel like the thing with him turning heel, right, is like 2021 when he brought Vibes back. You're talking the early days of Masquerade. Shun is still obviously very much a babyface at that point. I think they got by with Jason turning heel. They did a good job explaining that story of, he didn't want to be with Shun. He didn't want to be with Shun. Now he wants to be with Shun, and here's why. And I buy into that completely. And I think they did a good job with that. There's going to have to be some heavy lifting KZ, to get me to believe that KZ wants to team with Shun. Now, by the way, if he does, holy shit, because we're talking about Shun and KZ versus Doi and Dragon Kid possibly, and I am into that. But there has to be a lot of steps that are taken before we get there. And I feel like we can get those on Thursday. But I just don't know what steps there are to make it the justification for KZ to turn and then willingly, team with Shun with that. I have to bring up something real quick here. I want to be sure to mention it, and I want to be sure to give credit. Galazzo Dan, obviously excellent Twitter account, one of the best, one of the only good ones there is, brought up the fact, in this match, I cross my fingers and pray to the Lord above, happens at one of the two June Cork and Hall shows that they're running. Dragongate now has the ability to do the inverse of Shun Mante versus Kung Fu Masters. They can do Mante and Kame versus Jason and Shun. And oh my God, do they have to do that?
Yeah, that's spicy.
I credit to him. I had not thought of that until he tweeted it, and that right now is the most salivating, drool-inducing match in wrestling there is to me.
Well, getting back to the cage match, we had two people left. It was Hyo and Jason Lee. The final finish was a maximum driver through like about a dozen chairs. This was after the most insane powder attack possible done by Ishin onto Hyo, but it was Jason who escaped after that maximum driver through the chairs to get the fourth and final flag. In the post-match, we have Shun making sure everyone gets Hyo's hair. The last dance happens. KZ graduates JFK from Natural Vibes, and he gets a big hug on the ramp to end the show.
Yeah, I guess we got to talk about Jason here real quick. He was the fifth of five guys in this cage match, but I thought he did his job perfectly. Really, really engaging finishing stretch with he and Hyo. He came across like a killer. He came across like a dominant heel. I would hope they do that as a Bravegate match here sometime soon, and I could see Jason maybe even winning that.
I think he's too big, man.
That's true. You know what? That's you're exactly right. He spent the last year bulking up.
Yeah, like he's closer to 100 kilos than he is 82.
Yeah, no, you're right. I really liked what he did here, though. I thought this was, again, the focus was Kame, the focus was Hyo. Shun is going to be Shun. It's just, it's a different animal with him. But Jason really shined with the two guys left, he and Hyo.
Yeah, and it's something where Jason, in a way, you needed to have that person who was able to kind of not be the straw that stirs the drink. That is Shun Skywalker to me from now on. But it is something where, like, holding it together and kind of directing traffic in a way. and that was, like, a fun thing to see. And then as the person who thought that Jason was going to lose his hair, I think that's great going, especially into his homecoming shows in Hong Kong. He doesn't have to go and do his first shows in Hong Kong in 5 years, I think, with a shaved head and a new look. So I think that's pretty big for him. I do wonder now that if Z-Brat stays as it is, he's clearly kind of the number 2 now in that unit, how things kind of pan out for him, because we're already talking about Shun Skywalker and maybe the necessity of Shun to have the belt at this point. Does that prohibit Jason? Because I feel like that Jason's really redefined himself as a heel lately.
I would agree with that. I don't feel like Jason is on a winning Dreamgate level. I think he's a viable Dreamgate challenger. If they want to do he and Mante and Corkin in June, because again, they got 2 Corkin Hall shows, they got to do something there. There's no Toryumon reunion show coming unless they shock us this week and announce that. Maybe it's another Gate of Nostalgia type show, but I think they're going to do something big, and I could buy that. But he's 1B, it's Skywalker's unit, and I think Jason is firmly positioned ahead of where Kai's at right now, ahead of where Ishin's at now. Valletta's a wild card. I think Valletta's going home soon anyway, so you don't have to worry about him. He's the second guy in command, and that's a good spot for him.
Oh, I am totally with you on that. Yeah, and I think when we talk about Jason as a 1B and really kind of reaching this level as a heel, we kind of have to transpose that and discuss the loser of the match and his performance with this, Hyo. I think personally for me, this was one of the more impressive just overall performances of someone first time in the cage, between the way that he contributed to the eliminations and also the escapes and the finishing stretch. But maybe if this was not Kamei's match and it was not so much based around Kamei, I felt like in a way you kind of picked like the best moment for the most popular guy in your company to cut his hair, which was super long at that point. We should have seen it coming.
I mean, this was the best night of Hyo's career. And, if you remember 6 months ago when Big Hug formed, my whole thing was, Hyo, I knew Hyo was going to be with Mante. I said that for months, even when Mante was a heel. I said whenever he turns babyface, Hyo is going with him. I knew Hyo would be a successful babyface. I made the argument at one point, you might have to turn him face just so you can turn him heel again, but he's going to work as a babyface. I never expected him to be over at the level that he was immediately upon turning. And really outside of, Doi and Yamato, who still garner the largest reactions on every show, Hyo is the guy. He's been the hot guy, the guy with the most momentum, the most over guy on these shows. The one thing I said he needed great matches. Just historically, you and I are far more pro Hyo than most other people, and he just doesn't have that many great matches. And ever since he has joined Big Hug, that has changed. And not only was this obviously a great match, but he could go on to have a very fruitful, long, and successful career, and he will likely never top everything that he did Dead or Alive 2024.
And I feel like for like the fact that, KZ had the opportunity to be the first person to lose twice in the cage in Dragon System history. You have someone that I would argue at the time of their loss, I mean, going like backwards, like Mante, we knew he was going to lose that mask, right? Like that was something where we were all just kind of prepared for that, and it was just like, well, we're finally doing that storyline. That was
it's like a minus 500 favorite, let's say.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then going back to 2020, talking about, 2021. There was one before that, SBK, that felt like that was a check mark. Like, okay, he's lost the cage. We're ready to move on to his next
that was
stage.
very intentional booking.
Right. And then 2020, Shimizu, it kind of was like, all right, it's time to turn this guy face. We've seen essentially like 4 different kind of payoffs happen over the last 4 steel cage survival matches, and I would argue that this is the only one that has taken someone from being like already at the peak of their powers to now. And I think some of this also credit has to be going to Kamei, credit has to be going to Shun to be the foil in this. You kind of like prepared like this magical like post-match segment that Hyo now is a bigger star than ever.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, the only asterisk there is, Mante got hurt and had to go home. And I think if we have Mante versus Susumu and Korkin like we were supposed to a few days after that cage match, maybe we look at him a little bit different. It obviously worked out for him. I'm not worried about it. But the immediate aftermath, no. I mean, I'm reading people, and this is not a knock by any means, but I'm reading people talk about, should Hyo be the Dreamgate champion? And to me, it's a resounding no. I don't think he's at that level. I don't think he'll ever be at that level. And I think he's a guy who's probably best fit chasing rather than winning, even though I've enjoyed his Bravegate run. But that's how over he is coming out of this, is that we've got people saying, is the Bravegate belt beneath Hyo right now?
Yeah, and it's kind of wild, like thinking about at this time, the class of 2016, he was the one, and still very much so, he's the one without the Dreamgate there. And as I feel like I was kind of the number 1 Yuki Yoshioka defender when he was Dreamgate champion. And
I was right there with you. I maybe even more so now, but yes, go ahead.
But it is something where I kind of like look at this, and Shun has never been as over at one point in his career as Hyo was in Aichi on the 5th. Yoshioka, there might be moments, and I can entertain that conversation overall because he was the main character of Dragongate, basically, from King of Gate 2022 through the end of the year. And Benkei never has been as over as Hyo at this moment. It's really kind of remarkable. Like that is a completely valid conversation to be having at this point. Why is Hyo not Dreamgate champion?
That's wow. That's a great observation. It's tough with Shun. Shun's never been this over as a babyface. I don't know how to analyze him in this conversation with Shun's character now, because I would say Shun at this moment,
it would be a talk about effectiveness,
because he's a bigger star than Hyo, but Hyo is hotter right now, even if Shun is still hot. God, that's a great point, Mike. I really hadn't thought about that. Was Yoshioka more over during the stretch where he beat Eita, Yamato, and Mochi in succession than Hyo is now?
I think he is. I mean, maybe...
You think Hyo is?
I think Hyo is more over. Yeah, at this point.
Is Hyo more over now than Yoshioka was immediate post unmasking of Dia Inferno through Dead or Alive 2022 when he and Dia lost the belts, that very early run of D-Courage?
That's what I wonder. Because
that's probably the tough one, right?
Yeah, because I feel like he cooled down a little bit there.
I mean, yeah, you know, I might give Ben July 21st, 2019. I might give him that night. But we had the conversation with Ben coming out of World where he had no obvious contenders. And so they did, Yamato. And then from there was a slow crawl to get to Doi, where I think he was less and less effective as a champion, as a star with every defense until Doi upset him. That's tough. I mean, this was one of the most emotional things I've ever seen in a wrestling ring. Hyo brought, just raw emotion out of people in a way that I would say is rarely seen in any form of art. I mean, I put this in my show review. I talked to one of our listeners who was at Dead or Alive, and I'll read the DM here. We were talking in the moment as this was happening, and this person said, and I quote, "There was a woman that was behind the barricade right next to Hyo off camera that was literally on her knees crying. Hyo consoled her after Jackie went back to dance in the ring." I mean, you don't get that anymore. You don't get that anywhere. And in my review, voicesofwrestling.com, I think it's one of the better show reviews I've ever written. And I talk a lot in this cage match about, I think part of the reason I'm so perturbed with the winner in mainstream North American wrestling right now is that people act like it's good. And I'm not saying, Dragongate should have mass mainstream American appeal, but holy shit, man, it's just hard to compare the two. And if you know one, I don't know how you can respect the other. And this match was, I hate the word storytelling. I'm sick of wrestling companies using it. I'm more sick of wrestling fans using it. If it's not on this level, I don't want to fucking hear about it.
Yeah, and God, I mean, even like the small things, like Hyo bringing Jack's hand and basically having to guide him to do this because Shun's such an asshole. It's like, hey, as winners, we all have to take his hair, so you all have to shave Hyo's head. Just nothing is as good as it.
No, I feel like. I mean, it's so great. They used a spot that they had used 13 years earlier when Yamato got his head shaved 2011, which, you and I are in agreement, 2011, 2016, those are the gold standard cage matches and the only ones that I think we'd rank above this. It was, the same thing. Yamato had a chance to escape, and then he looked back and he saw Shingo losing a 3-on-1 beatdown, and he hopped back in the ring, and it ended up biting Yamato in the ass, and that's how Yamato, by the way, about a year and a half later, that's what he used to motivate his heel turn when he joined Matt Blanky and turned on Shingo was, you left me in the cage. I went to sacrifice myself, and I lost my hair. And they do the same spot with Hyo, and it was equally as effective. And, the fallout of this match, I got to be honest, I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting post-escape Kame to have the emotion that he did, screaming every time Jason would hit a move, screaming in anguish, wanting Hyo to escape this cage, and then everything with the head shaving afterwards. And this goes to, Shun just being the best character there is in wrestling right now, making sure that the rules were enforced where everybody had to cut a part of Hyo's hair. I mean, this is up there as one of the most emotional moments in the history of Dragon Gate. And when you say that, when you put it on that plane, it becomes one of the most emotional things to ever take place in wrestling.
Yeah. And it's something where now, as we look forward, it's going to be tough for Big Hug to keep up that kind of thing, because there's a natural pullback in a way. And seeing how things will go on Thursday as it relates to they kind of feel like now the story has been told. So at least with like the match lineup and everything, it's like, okay, all right. Like they're clearly not really at like the forefront with this, but like you have essentially number one, number two, and then conservatively somewhere between 3 and 5 most popular guy on the roster in this unit. And you have one of the most emotionally affecting and successful post-match cage match, anything that in Dragon System history. I feel like that this is as up to the I mean, talking about emotion, like the 2009 Bravegate tournament with Naoki Tanizaki bawling in the ring with his daughter.
Yeah.
This is like that's the point of comparison I'm thinking about. Like the graduations. I mean, fuck. I mean,
that's what I mentioned in my review. I said Tanizaki's Bravegate win, where, for those that don't know the story, 2009 opened the Bravegate tournament for the vacant belt. The tournament comes down to Tanizaki and Kagetora and Hakata Star Lanes, and Dragongate makes a point of, hey, Naoki Tanizaki's daughter's in the front row. He's doing this for his daughter, and he wins the match, and he has this emotional celebration in the ring. It's moving on a human level, forget a wrestling level. And then, the UHA graduation, the rarely seen Pac graduation from Kobe World 2012, that has to be mentioned. And I think the Kness retirement, I think those are the things that need to be discussed when we talk about the most emotional moments in Dragongate history. And I think this is right up there with any of them.
Yeah. And I mean, that Pac one is like, I think it's one of the reasons why it did not make the Infinity Cut. I think that's why.
It did. Because World 2012, it's really, really hard to find the full version of that show, the pay-per-view airing. That is not something that's in regular circulation. And so I don't think a lot of people have seen that.
Yeah. And it was done after Kobe World concluded. This was like the go home promo was because Shima defended the Dreamgate. It was not like Shima talking about like, okay, what's next here going forward in the company. No, it was, hey, so Pac's graduating. He just won a Triangle Gate match on this show, and we're doing the graduation ceremony to close out the show.
I think in terms of Big Hug, you asked how they can keep their momentum up. I think it's really simple. I think they have to wrestle just a ton of trios matches. You've got Corkin on the 9th. That card's full. They're not doing anything there as a trio. You've got, I don't know if you know this, if you realize this, Mike, Osaka number 2 on Saturday and Kobe Sambo Hall on Sunday.
Oh, it's a wild week.
Big week. Trio. You have to headline Osaka with a Big Hug trios match, and I would do the same thing in Kobe, and I would just have those 3 guys attached at the hip on every show until you physically can't. I think the more we see the 3 of these guys together, I think the more effective it'll be, the more over they'll all be as a result.
Yeah, I am absolutely with you on that. But that was the cage match. Just one of the things that I feel like that in the promotion, getting back to having this in Aichi, especially with the just overall question about what will be dead or alive next year. I am glad at the very least, like closing out the run of this arena with Dragongate, the same way I felt about Pac versus KZ to close out Hakata Star Lanes. This Steel Cage Survival match felt like the right way to close out Dolphins Arena.
If you had to rank your 3 greatest Dragongate cage match wrestlers of all time, who would be on that list?
Well, before tonight, I would say Yamato. I think Yamato is just the linchpin of the comp. Whenever there's a cage match, Yamato is the person doing the craziest stuff and the most emotionally affecting stuff.
Yep.
He is the 5-tool player. I think like the person where here's my overall thing. I think Kyo had like such a performance in this one night that he has made my top 3.
I like the take.
Because when you look at, like, you have to look at it all in concert, right? Like, it's because this match, you're not going to talk about, like, okay, what happens after the bell does not matter. That's not what these matches are. And when you look at it as complete performance, like, from when the bell started, from when the 5-minute buzzer said that people can start escaping, throughout the match, who has given a more complete 1-year in-ring performance in a cage match than Hyo. You really can't think of very many.
Well,
So,
the funny thing is, I knew just from talking to you before the show that you wanted to have somebody. You were going to mention somebody that was their first cage match. I thought you were going to mention Kame and not Hyo, and I think both would be applicable here.
yeah, the thing with Kame is that like he escaped, and like you don't get like, yes, he was in the post match segment, but like he wasn't there to be turned on. He wasn't there to take the last elimination, and like those moments that I feel like the like just as much as the crazy stuff is important for kind of the Dragongate outsiders, for me it is such a big thing for like when the match is over and one person is kind of left in the ring, those moments before like the Razor gets brought out or Shun Skywalker starts cackling. I feel like those moments are pretty important, and I felt like that Hyo, in a way, in the shock with Hyo and Kamei screaming for him afterwards, just, I don't know, it kind of set him apart, and I feel like that's why I have Hyo on this list rather than Kamei. And I think my third one, I feel like it's got to be Naruki Doi, because he always has like, because he wrestles the exact same match he always does, but he includes crazy cage match shit, and it's
Interesting.
Yeah,
I would have Yamato. I would like to see Hyo in one more cage match before I throw him on the list. The person that I think has to be included, I've got two names here, but I rewatched a bunch of cage matches last week. I watched the 2015 cage for the first time since it aired, and the 2019 cage for the first time since it aired. There's one guy that's in both those matches that was also in the 2024 match. I was so taken aback by how good KZ is, and especially the 2015 match, but also the 2019 match, and then what he did here. KZ's on the list. I mean, go rewatch the 2015 cage.
I think I need to, because it took me a minute to realize, oh yeah, KZ lost that match.
Yeah, no, that's the one where Shima loses. That's where he gets his teeth knocked down and he loses his hair.
I thought that was 2017 because
no, 20. Okay.
It was the first bad T-Hawk Dreamgate push, not the second one.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you're right.
So
Yeah.
KZ loses his hair in 2014, and if I remember correctly, he's like Doi's delegate or something. Like Doi loses that match, but KZ loses his hair. It was a way more complicated setup. 2015 is Die Hard's KZ. He's in the match. He's unbelievable. 2019 KZ, that's early Natural Vibes. He's in the match. He's great. I would have KZ in there, and then I would also have BB Hulk in there, because I think Hulk has been involved in some really classic cage matches. The 2011 one, the 2014 one, and the 2017 one, which is not as good, but I remember liking Hulk in that match. So
Hulk was my last cut.
Yeah, he's been in. Hulk was in 2008, 2009, 2011, 2014, and 2017, and 2020. He's been in 6, and I think he's been very, very good in 4 or 5 of those.
And I would say 2014, like we talk about 2011 and we talk about 2016 as being like the best ones overall. I look at 2014 as kind of like the textbook model of how you accomplish a lot of things in a steel cage match. And a lot of that was based around, all right, everyone turning on BB Hulk becoming the star, and then the formation of diehards coming out of it.
Can I say something that is going to cause you to take a deep breath directly into your microphone?
All right, I'm not going to hit I'm not going to mute. I'm going to leave my cough button off. What is it?
Were you aware, did it hit you, that the Flamita versus Jimmy Susumu match is 10 years old?
If that makes sense. Hey, we're going to see Flamita around a little soon.
Yeah. Look, Flamita has a career because of that match. Talk about Team Revolucion not having a historical comp. There's nothing quite like Flamita having one match against Susumu and everybody going, that's the guy. And I feel like I've liked later stages of Flamita's career more than most. I would love it. I would absolutely love it if he was back in Dragongate. But that match, which has dictated Flamita's entire career up until he met Bandito, and then his career became he's Bandito's friend, that match is 10 years old.
Hey, he was the Monic for a bit, and his pizza love, and Alan bringing that up had me have my most awkward pro wrestling T-shirt right.
Remind me what that shirt is.
It's a penguin and a Flamina mascot eating pizza.
That's right. Yeah, that's what a amalgamation of words that is.
Ring of Honor merch. What can we say?
The lifeguard. What ROH unit was Flamita in? Let me see if I can find that out real quick. Because it wasn't lifeguard was like Mark Haskins.
You mean Lifeblood, not Lifeguard. Lifeguard. Hold up. Lifeguard is going to be a unit in my Dragon System Splinter promotion that happens when I win Powerball Chaos. Okay. And you know who I think will be a great lifeguard? Marcus Mathers.
Yeah, that's true. According to Cage Match, Flamita was in Mexa Squad with Bandito and Ray Horace, which, man, I gotta be honest, that feels lazy. That feels like a really lazy name to call them Mexa Squad.
Well, that was like right after him and Bandito were Mexa Blood, and that was like their long-term tag team. Because I remember doing back when everyone was doing like I remember like there was like a period where we were doing a bunch of draft shows. I feel like drafting cards, and I remember doing like a lucha show that I made sure that I had Mexa Blood, and that was the one that I made sure that Dr. Wagner and Hio Del Santo were going to have a mask versus mask match on too.
They won the ROH World Six-Man titles on January 11th, 2020. They beat Brody King, Flip Gordon, and Marty Scurll of Villain Enterprises. Main event on that show, ROH World title match. PCO defeats Roosh via DQ in 11:25. I mean, what do you do with that? And then I look
Ring
at
of Honor 2019 just was bad. Just bad.
But you remember before the pandemic, like it's literally this time period, like 2020 Ring of Honor, it wasn't great, but they were trying things for the first, like, Sinclair era Ring of Honor is a lot of bad. It's a lot of underrated because nobody watched it. And then it's 2 or 3 years of we have Cody and we have the Young Bucks and that's our promotion. And when they left, Ring of Honor was interesting for the first time in a while. Because I feel like maybe Juice Robinson got a big push. And then Zack Sabre Jr. did one booking there and then basically told him to fuck off. And it was like the Dragon Lee and Roosh promotion. And it was kind of one of those great, like, oh, if the pandemic didn't happen, what would Ring of Honor have become things?
Yeah, it was something where, like, you also, like, although you had interesting things, I remember, like, they still had everything booked as if they still had the Elite around. And it was, like, those really sad venues. Because I remember, like, they came through, because I was still in Greenville at the time. And them coming through the Carolinas and getting, like, a photo of them at center stage. And it was like, oh, I remember when Cody was here and it completely sold out. Now,
I gotta say, I am a big separate the art from the artist guy. This Ring of Honor 2020 roster is canceled. Oh my goodness, some of the names on these cards.
Yeah, it's rough, man.
Oh my goodness. All right. Oh, let's talk about the Dreamgate match.
All right, so open the Dreamgate title match. Luis Mante now becomes the most successful foreign Dreamgate champion as he defeats Gianni Valletta in just over 12 minutes with a tilt-a-whirl inside cradle. Case, I just have one question I want to ask as kind of like our broaching this topic. What did this all accomplish?
It's tough, right? You know, there was a number of ways that this match could have gone that I was fully prepared for. I was prepared for a train wreck. There was a part of me that was prepared for a shockingly great match. The thing that I wasn't prepared for is what we got, which was a boring match. I thought no matter what, we would have a bunch to talk about. And instead, we just got a boring 15-minute match where I think Valletta got exposed for being a small room act, and I'm curious to see what the response is like in Corkin. You know, if I were Dragongate, I would make sure that his entrance is twice as long and twice as destructive as it has been to try to get him some edge back. I don't think it helped Mante all that much. It definitely didn't help Valletta, so it didn't accomplish much to answer your question.
Yeah, I just like I know that was the more negative one about Johnny coming in here, but like at the very least, I was expecting that this would be something where it's like, okay, this is a much bigger guy who has been based in Mexico for years at a time. Hey, maybe Luis Mante will fly around a little bit. And we did get a little bit of that there, but instead, like moments of like, oh, big turns where like Johnny ducking out of the way of a huge tope where hey, the one thing about Mante in these matches, he goes all out and he's always been willing to crash and burn, but it just was not really adding anything to it. And I just like look at this and the fact that Valletta was built up by having all these squashes and having all this time devoted to it, and it just feels like what are we doing here? Like what was the purpose of all of this? I feel like that Mante looks worse coming out of this because he doesn't feel like a vanquishing hero. He feels like he escaped by. Like why was it that why was it that Johnny Valletta didn't go down to like 2 Vuelta finales? Or why was it that instead of this tilt-a-whirl inside cradle that doesn't look that great, Case, why was it that he kicked out of the Super T?
That's the thing. They could have gotten by with a Super Tigre pretty easily here, and I think it would have been effective. This match needed to be half the length that it was because there was good in here. You know, I gave it 3 stars for a reason. I liked the story of Mante being unable to hit the tope and then finally hitting just a gorgeous and violent tope suicida. I loved the fact that early in the match, Valletta hit a big choke slam on the apron, and I thought, all right, here we go. The match was 15 minutes. It should have been 7. You know, they should have just never stopped moving. And instead, we kind of had this Randy Orton-esque pace to it, and it did nobody any favors.
Yeah, so now Mante, we don't really have indication. We're doing King of Gate in August again, right?
That's not official, but I would certainly assume so.
Yeah, just because like now in 2 weeks everyone's in Hong Kong. Like it just seems like we're going to have to find a way somewhere to determine what's next for Luis Mante, and there's not really a lot of good answers for it.
No, I mean you look at Corkin and the opening match is he and Hyo versus Kakuta and Tanaka. I would assume they're not going back to the Kakuta well. If anything, that seems like it might be a chance to set up Tanaka versus Hyo, which I would be intrigued by. I don't know what they do. You know, to me, this is the most pro Shun Skywalker argument there is that I don't know what you do with Mante. And that doesn't mean that he's dead in the water. Again, I think he's been a net positive champion, but he doesn't come out of this specific match feeling super hot. And I think Dragongate has run into an issue time after time where they have these Dreamgate champions where, you know, this promotion, their booking philosophy is everything matters and everything bleeds into the next, except for with their Dreamgate champions, where they get through one defense and then they have to stop cold and find another challenger, and that takes a month, and you know it's hard to build momentum that way.
Yeah, it's really a statement where they did the payoff for Kota Minoura and Yamato, with Kota Minoura getting the fall on the All Together show, and we're still sitting around going like, well, no one's really like looked strong or is picking up wins in a way where like we're like thinking like, oh, Shimizu's coming, or how, oh, KZ's coming. Like we don't have any of that whatsoever. And it feels like that with the schedule here, and you're looking for direct falls over Mante, and I just don't see that like happening while TV, like I don't think that Kakuta is going to pen Mante here, so Tokyo's not setting up his next match. So
no, I mean, Strong Machine J. Here's the situation they're in. Here's the tricky situation: is that they're either going to do a Dreamgate challenge in June, which I would say if you're going to do that, Jason certainly fits that bill, and I think you could do Jason versus Mante and Phil Corkin pretty easily. But if they're not going to do something in June, his next defense is likely World. And what the hell are you going to do there?
Yeah, I have no idea. Unless
is it? I mean,
are you going to pay for a Shingo defense at this point?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I mean, you tell me. I'm talking natural vibes KZ here. Is vibes KZ versus Mante, and let's say some sort of, maybe, Kame and Hyo versus Skywalker and Jason, and then like a Doi Dragon Kid big Twin Gate match against Stars. Is KZ versus Mante a strong enough main event? Is that the direction we're going?
I personally, no. Because for me personally, I look at Kobe World and I look at this 25th anniversary year. Hey, we're finally doing new graphics for that, by the way. And I look at that and I look at Kobe World, and I don't think that you have to build up KZ to that point. And I just don't know if it's going to be a good service for anyone's time that you're doing that with KZ instead of resolving what Natural Vibes Chapter 4 or its conclusion is going to be.
Yeah,
Casey has other stuff on his plate right now, basically.
I know. Minoru doesn't make any sense. I would be intrigued if Yoshioka came back and got hot. I would be intrigued by that, but that feels like a stretch,
Hey, they've moved on from Yoshioka versus Kiyomiya.
I know. I'm a little concerned about that. I think Junior is supposed to be in the UK until the end of the month. I was under the impression he would be back by World, just given what his home promotion in the UK has said.
Same, yeah.
But that feels like a massive leap. That doesn't seem likely. It doesn't. I mean, are we working ourselves into a shoot here? Is it Yamato versus Mante?
I mean, I kind of like that.
It's a match that we've never seen. I like that aspect of it.
Yamato has been out of the limelight. We will see what We Are Team Veteran Returns version 5 ends up being. But I think that, especially considering the anniversary year, Yamato, if you're not doing the title switch on to Shun, which would be such a big thing, concluding a Kobe World with a heel champion. I think Yamato.
And then 25th anniversary, no less.
Yeah, I think Yamato is the answer.
Yamato's last two Dreamgate matches, Final Gate 2021, where he lost the belt to Kai, and Gate of Destiny 2022, so November 2022. So we're talking, it'll be 18 months, basically, even a little more, since his last Dreamgate match, if they do he and Mante at World. That's got to be the betting odds favorite right now.
Yep, that's who I have in the clubhouse.
Just have it be Shun. There's so much to you. Shun, the Shun title reign writes itself. You don't have to do any booking.
No, I'm with you on that. It's something where I just look at this and the overall issue with Dragongate stuff and with the Dreamgate is they tell the story, or at least they tell the first chapter of the story, but what's behind that next chapter? A whole bunch of blank pages because they spent so much time developing that first chapter that we might break glass and go Yamato or get the belt onto Shun at this point.
I would not be concerned about Mante as champion. Again, I hate the way that he won the belt. If it were up to me, Mante would be chasing Shun and Mante would be winning at World. To me, that was the story, but they didn't do that. Great match against Shun. Still felt cold leaving Bayside, but I think by Osaka, with the Susumu match, heated up a little bit. Was great at Rey de Parejas. Felt like a champion to me leaving Rey de Parejas. The Valletta match, look, it was high risk, high reward, and they didn't live up to it. I understand why they wanted to do the match. I understand what they saw there. I don't think they executed it to the degree that they would have liked. And now we have to figure out what he does from here, because it cooled Mante off. I don't think it's in the world. I don't think you have to get the belt off of him, but it cooled him off. It cooled him off a little bit, and now they're going to have to recover as, again, we're 2 months away from their biggest show of all time.
Yeah, no. The one place that we don't have to talk about recovering, because it's been recovered, the Twin Gates are back in Dragongate as Team Hug, or Team Not Hug, defeats Alejandro and Kaito Kiyomiya. They become the 66th Open the Twin Gate Championship with a Doible onto Alejandro. And I think it's such an interesting thing, this show, because you have one of the what I think will end up being one of the most memorable cage matches of all time. And then we're going to be like 5 years from now, then remind ourselves, like we'll be talking about like, oh, 2024 cage match, big hug. But then we look down the card and we have Team Not Hug versus Team Noah in a 4.5-star cracker of a Twin Gate match.
I said this in my review. I want to reiterate it here. I think it's so important to note, just for historical purposes, that Naruki Doi, a Toryumon 2000 project, lifelong junior heavyweight, went nose to nose this entire match with the GHC heavyweight champion, and he belonged. You know, the talk out of this match is, when are we doing Doi versus Kiyomiya? And I'm sure Kiyomiya would love that, because he would get so much more out of that match than he would anybody else on the Noah roster outside of, well, I was going to say Nakajima, but Nakajima's not there. So I think anybody on the Noah roster, you know, Doi is just on another planet right now. And I said this 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to have to say it again. You know, when we did Greatest Wrestler Ever with Alan Forel in 2021, Doi was one of the last people that I added to my top 100. And it took me a long time to convince myself that Doi should be on the list. But once I convinced myself Doi should be on the list, he went from 99 to 91 to 89 to, you know, I think he finished in like the low 80s on my list. And now, if I'm going to create that ballot again and list the 100 greatest wrestlers of all time, Doi is just, he's a slam dunk candidate. I'm not saying he's top 50, but of course Naruki Doi is one of the 100 greatest wrestlers of all time. He's been doing this at a high level for 24 years now. And it's the same thing I say about him, that I say about Dragon Kid, that I say about Masaki Mochizuki, is that I think we underestimate the longevity of some of these guys. It is so rare in wrestling to be great, and Doi has been great, and Dragon Kid has been great for 25 years. That is 1974 to 1999. Think about that length of time. That is how good how long Doi and Dragon Kid have been, and my God, they're just as good as ever.
Yeah, and it's something where you have these two guys who have been great tag team wrestlers. Doi up there on my Mount Rushmore. Dragon Kid sneaky tag team great wrestler here. And the real joy of Rey de Parejas was seeing, like, in a way, the two like most like gifted guys who've never really been on the same team with each other, being able to go like, all right, they're on a brand new football team, and they just know where they are on routes.
Yeah, just snap right into it. You know, if this is your first Dragongate show, you'd probably, like, if you knew a little bit about Dragongate but didn't know exactly what was happening, you would think Doi and Dragon Kid are speed muscle. You would go, oh, this is the legendary tag team everybody's been talking about. Their chemistry is that good.
Yeah, and it's something where I think the thing that makes Naruki Doi so special is it is something where I think that, and I'm not ready to go back through his first Dreamgate run, but I think it was something that, as of the time, and as someone who went through the 08 through 2010 Dreamgate run, it was so dissatisfying that everything kind of went back towards the tag team thing, when in reality he is not just this profound tag team wrestler. I mean, Case, you listed 10 guys he's had, or 9 guys that he's had 4-star or greater tag team wrestling matches with,
and that by the way, that's in title matches. I didn't even throw in deep cuts. Like, there's
Jason Lee was a great tag team partner of his.
There's I think you'll know the match I'm talking about. It was Doi and Shisa versus Milano and Yoshino, early 2004. It's a phenomenal match, and I'm not even counting that.
Fuji Land.
Exactly. I'm talking. Doi's had 9 different tag team partners that he's had title matches with that have had matches 4 stars or higher.
It's just profound. And then you have someone like Kaito Kiyomiya, who we talked about him at Gate at Base. I've talked to him about at Final Gate. He is someone where, like, at this point, he acts like such a little dick, in a way. Like his little like smiling wave to the crowd cracked me up, and the pace and everything that goes along with it. It is something where it's like, yes, this guy like has this blood oath and this devotion to Noah that is so profound and so deep that we can't possibly understand it. But you just like see him in this, and you're like, man, it would have been real fun to see him team with Shun Skywalker right now, and just be an absolute little prick.
I really hope he comes back for World and has something to do at World. I mean, look, this is one of the L's that I'm so happy to take. It really on the high list of like, man, I'm so glad I was wrong about this, because when they announced Yoshioka and Daya, because you got to remember that's how that started. Yoshioka and Daya were supposed to wrestle Kiyomiya and Alejandro at Final Gate, and I thought, man, this match is gonna suck. Kiyomiya is gonna be on house show mode. Alejandro's going to try, but you've got this fourth guy who's just not going to care. I just assumed, given everything we legitimately know about Kiyomiya's life, that he would look down on Dragon Gate and become an anchor in that tag match. I was not looking forward to it at all. Yoshioka gets hurt, obviously becomes the Ben and Minoru match, which I thought was very good, but not great, and Kiyomiya pleasantly surprised me in how hard that he worked. And then you have the Bayside match, and then you have this match. I can't believe how hard Kiyomiya worked. I can't believe the pacing of this match, how balls out that he went a day after a GHC Heavyweight Championship match. I have no notes for this guy. I thought he was perfect in his time in Dragon Gate. I hope he comes back. And I say this, I said this after Bayside too. I loved him in New Japan. I thought he was great. I watched the World Tag League because of Kiyomiya. That is high praise. I thought he was great here. And I watched, did you watch Kiyomiya versus Dr. Wagner 3 from May 4?
That is like the last Golden Week show I have left for me is the Wrestle Magic show.
Okay.
He's had like such a wild week though, if you look at it.
I know, and the thing with the Wagner match is like, it's worth your time. You should watch it. I would give it in the same way, we have the term Gentleman's 3. I would give that a Gentleman's 4. It's objectively like what they did was great. They went out there and had a quote great professional wrestling match. But Kiyomiya in Dragon Gate and Kiyomiya in New Japan is so much more interesting, and he wrestles with so much more confidence in those promotions than he does Noah. I come away, again, 2 great matches, but Kiyomiya's individual performance in Dragon Gate was so far and away better, I thought, than what he did in Noah, and I liked what he did in Noah.
And it is something to state that the one L he had over this period was in Dragon Gate.
That's right. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, he wiped out Uemura with his Shining Wizard. Just some spots from this match that I feel like were worth mentioning. We got a muscular bomb tease that I completely bit towards the end.
I did too.
I thought that he was just going to crunch him. I was like, oh, Alejandro, you really wanted to be a Dragon Gate wrestler. Well, congrats. You're going to have neck problems like 1, 2.
God, isn't it just, I mean, Alejandro wrestles like it's Dragon Gate fantasy camp, and he's just so excited to be there. And I just let him come over. He's in the juniors division. You're not going to notice he's gone.
I'm imagining, like, you know what this match is? This is his Dragon Gate like legend fantasy camp match. You know, like how the Yankees have like
exactly
baseball fantasy. Then it's like, oh yeah, I went out and I went to go and I hit some balls.
He's hitting BP off David Cohn right now. Like that's what this is.
Yeah. Congrats. Not Hug is doing BP with David Wells.
Yeah. It's exactly what we're witnessing right now. Is like he's cosplaying as a Dragon Gate wrestler, and he's having so much fun doing it.
I mean, the Super Ultra Hurricane Rana was, maybe not do that in a match with Dragon Kid, maybe
that Kiyomiya did.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was terrifying.
Yeah, I was just like, oh God, like now, that was the moment I was like, oh, I guess not Hug is going to lose this match. Like I thought, I was like, oh, if he's doing the Super Ultra Hurricane Rana, that means that Dragon Kid's not going to do that, and that's usually how Dragon Kid wins Twin Gate matches. But instead, we got the Doible, which each time they do it, I kind of like the fact that it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it just kind of crunches with that. This time it came out of Alejandro619. I was 4.5 stars on this as well. I don't know, because they're such two different things, how I would say if this was better or if the cage match was better. It's just that this will be the match that in 5 years we're going to be talking about the cage match and realize, holy shit, Team Noah versus Not Hug was on this card too.
Yeah, exactly. You know, this match was. I'm very much a believer in, like, star ratings are star ratings. People overthink them. They're very easy to do. One match was better than the other. This is the rare instance where I rate the cage match lower, but the cage match is better than this match because of all the emotion involved. But this match was awesome. The spot that I loved was Doi hits the Doi fives. He goes off the ropes for the Bakatare, but Kiyomiya pops up. He hits the jumbo knee. Doi hits the ropes again, then hits the Bakatare, and then Kiyomiya rolls through back onto his feet and hits the Shining Wizard. And I detest the fact that he does the Shining Wizard, but he did it there and it was really cool. I adored that spot.
You know, if he would do it more out of nowhere, I feel like, and make it kind of like that kind of thing, whereas without doing like all the Muto,
the stank ass Muto pose, just, it sucks. I feel so bad for the guy. He has been emotionally and physically abused by his home promotion for 7 years now, and it just sucks because I think we're getting the worst version of Kaito Kiyomiya is what we're getting out of him and Noah.
Would it surprise you that there was a lot of Muto pandering at all?
No, of course not. The guy won't. It's like, I feel the same way about Keiji Muto that I feel about Tommy Dreamer. Fuck off. Go away. I don't even. I say this all the time. I don't even like peak Muto that much. Like, I'm historically lower on him than most people are. I want him to fuck off.
Yeah, I always was a Hosh guy out of the Three Musketeers personally.
As was I. The good thing about this finish, because I assumed that Noah would retain and that they would just hold off until D-Courage was healthy again. The good news about this is, barring any sort of shocking result, which I really don't foresee happening, this makes sure that Doi does something interesting at Kobe World. And I think that's a massive win. Doi would have been on the show one way or another, but if we get Twin Gate Doi instead of 8-man tag Doi, that is something we can all celebrate.
Absolutely so. And especially like the idea of having some sort of tag. Like, I don't think it's possible to say this, and I feel kind of bad putting this out there, but like, wouldn't it be like a whole lot of fun if somehow like they do the big tag team bring in like they used to? I don't think it's the case anymore with the end, and then it's like, oh yeah, Sabin and Shelly are at Kobe World this year. They used to do stuff like that.
Problem is, unless it's like an AEW team, I just don't know who you bring in. And even if it's an AEW team, I don't know who you bring in.
Yeah, no, like that's the thing, because
I don't want the guns. Keep the guns away. I get to enjoy one promotion fully and authentically. Don't bring the guns into this promotion.
And I mean, hey, we tried a old kind of retro act before with Gianni, and we saw how it paid off. We don't need to have the chicken shit heel tag team. And
that's, what AEW team do you bring in?
I mean, the problem is that also AEW probably would want to go over. Like, whatever team they're going to send over that would be a big enough name, they're not going to want to drop the fall, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe.
The way that Tony Khan has kind of treated Dragongate and everything like this, I feel like that he'd probably be not. I don't think they'd be flying over to do business.
Could they? Well, no, he's hurt. Damn. Flamita and Bandito. If Flamita's going to be back, that'd be such an interesting match. That would be
the fly-in that I would absolutely love. Now that you've said that, I'm totally with you on that, especially for Kobe World and Not Hug. But yeah, this was one of the best things I've seen in the last few weeks. Worth going out of your way for. The last thing on Dead or Alive worth going out of your way for. I'll read through the other results in a second. Natural Vibes explodes in Aichi. Hometown Boy UT versus Strong Machine J, and UT gets the Bien Yave fighting for it for a while, and in a match where Strong Machine J kind of ran through him until UT went for the shoulder, the Bien Yave won out, and after this match, Strong Machine J walked out through the crowd through the front, However, we would find out later on, whatever frustration that was not permanent. He is back and good with natural vibes.
I liked this match, but I get the impression a lot of people liked it way more than I did.
I was 3.5 on it.
Okay, that's where I was at.
And for me, like, that's 3.5 with my usual UT bump, you know?
Yeah.
Like, honestly, if I didn't already know your results and you were going to say, yeah, I went 3 stars on this, I would go like, you know what? Fair.
Yeah, in the moment, the people watching live, I felt like they were way more into it than I was, but I really into Strong Machine J, you know, and again, we kind of talked about it with the cage match, the huge babyface pop that he got when he realigned with Vibes. I mean, you have to remember 2 years ago, and it was King of Gate 2022, which was in May. It was kind of a novelty that we had Strong Machine J singles matches, and this was right when we started to put together like, oh, Jay is becoming a guy again. He has some confidence. He's staying healthy. He has some momentum. And I remember there was like a 3-minute Shun and Strong Machine J singles match from that King of Gate that you and I were like, oh, like, look at the fire that he showed. That's really something there. And I guess it's a good thing that we've come to just expect good Strong Machine J singles matches. There was a point in time where it seemed like maybe that wasn't going to be a thing that he was capable of, but he certainly is now. And, you know, once again, I thought really strong work in this match.
Yeah, it just was kind of fun that, like, UT was going like, oh, I'm in my hometown. It's great. And Strong Machine J was just not having any of it early on. They told a nice story here that kind of played off of everything. And, you know, for someone that this is the rare time, actually, where, let me look at this. The Nagoya natives were 3 for 3 at a Dead or Alive show with 2 people actually being in the direct fall. That never happens at Dead or Alive. Yeah, so usually what you would see happen for those who are dipping in because it's a big show. This is a show that's based around Aichi, which is Dragon Kid, Ultimo Dragon, and UT's hometown. And the favorite thing that they have for Dead or Alive this year was a special one. Was their favorite thing was beating up Dragon Kid. So good for him. Gets the win here in his hometown building. Okay, so I'm going to run through the other 3 results real quick. I know that we were really focusing on like the highlight stuff. I want to get through this card.
Yeah, please.
No. So we had as our opener Gold Class versus Veteran Army. Kota Minoura dropping the fall to Yamato. 8 minutes 58 seconds with the Galleria. Toru Owashi and Big Boss Shimizu team 100 or like 150 kilos. They win by disqualification as Ishin and Kai go for weapons after 5 minutes. Really, really deflating there. And then the last undercard match, 8-man tag, Ultimo and D Courage versus unaffiliated vets with Mochi Fuji, Kanda, and Problem Dragon. Dragon Dia debuted, and it's not been named yet. This new driver that's like this Fisherman Buster Galleria variant that looks like that's going to be the big move he's going to be doing in Best of the Super Juniors.
Yeah, super cool move. Really, unexpected and enjoyable there. Dia, do we have to do Dia Super Juniors now, or can we do that next week?
I think Super Junior starts on the 11th, bud.
Okay. When's the... Hold on, I got 2023 calendar pulled up. Hold on. Where are we at here? Let me get into the modern world. May 2024. Okay, well, Dia real quick on Super Juniors. He's got a new move, which I think is necessary. I don't know if the Reptilian Rana is the strongest finish that he could have, and I like that he's not just doing the Firebird Splash. It's a super cool move. The matches of him and Super Juniors I'm most looking forward to. He and Dokai are wrestling in Nagoya. I think that match could be awesome. That match is on May 19th. He and Francesco Akira on the opening night, May 11th. I think that could be strong. And he and Robbie Eagles in Osaka are the things that I'm most looking forward to.
Yeah, he has Taiji Shimori and Korakuen. Very easy Torimon X versus Dragongate kind of match we have there for him.
Problem is, and it might be great, and I hope it is, I can't get excited about an Ishimori match in 2024.
Yeah, it's something where he's like so fully in that one part of that one part of Bullet Club that you're just kind of just groaning a little bit about. One that I'm just kind of like morbidly interested in, because I know like a lot of people are a lot higher on the guy now than I am. But in Shizuoka, Dragon Dia versus Ninja Mac is something that I'll be interested to see, because I feel like if there's a match that Dragon Dia will feel that will be able for him to kind of fly around and do what he wants to do and focus more on that style of things, I feel like it is that kind of Ninja Mac match that kind of presents that.
I am not buying the Ninja Mac stock in the same way that other people are.
Yeah,
so
folks are really getting in on that.
I hope to be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I just can't see that personally. At least for myself, that's just not really something
I'm not there yet. I hope to be one day. I'm not there yet.
Yeah, one day I would love to be a part of it. I just want to see. I'm just looking real quick. He has Kushida at like one of the Korakuen shows. I'm just trying to see.
Which could be good. Kushida falls under the same category as Ishimori. That could be a great match. I can't possibly be looking forward to it, though.
And that is his last block match. And that does make me think that he will. I for Dragon Gate fans, I don't anticipate probably more than like 2 wins out of this.
Oh,
and,
no. This isn't a Ricochet or Pac situation.
Right, yeah. And the fact that he's facing Kushida on the last night tells me he's not really going to play into things. Before we get out of your case, should we look at this Korakuen card?
Please. Oh, my God, yeah.
So, as we've been talking about, the opener is Big Hug, Luis Mante and Hio versus D Courage, Madoka Kakuta, and Ryoya Tanaka. Eyes on Tanaka in that match. Don Fuji, Toru Owashi, and Takashi Yoshida versus Punch Tominaga, Ryu Fuda, and Daiki Yanagiuchi. Maybe like to see them kind of step up a little bit. In the Mike Spears special, we have Yasushi Kanda and the return of Kenichiro Arai versus Jason Lee and Johnny Valletta. Wonder how much longer Valletta's tour is going. There's like a part of me that thinks that I haven't seen cards past Korakuen. Would not be surprised if after this TV loop, that would be it. You know,
I can't find it. I swear he has a booking back in Malta at some point in May. I'm like positive this is a thing, but I cannot find the poster of it that I saw at one point. So maybe I'm making it up, but I swear he has a booking back in Malta later this month. So I expect him to go home after Kobe, but I could be wrong. I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, and this is also the month that, you know, you have the triple shot in Sapporo too. So,
that's right, yeah.
And Hong Kong. So it would make sense for that for him. A Dragon Dia Best of the Super Junior 31 send-off match. This one has people who've all participated in a Best of the Super Juniors going up against other veteran stars. It is Ultimo Dragon, Masaki Mochizuki, BB Hulk, and Dragon Dia versus Dragon Kid, Naruki Doi, Kagatora, and Shuji Kondo.
What a cool match. What a great concept. I
just think that it is a fun way of doing this without doing like an outright like triple dragon match again. You know?
No, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that maybe the match won't be great. Maybe other people don't care. I get off on this stuff. I think it is a super cool way to acknowledge that Dragon Dia is in Best of Super Juniors. Did you see the video of, I think it was it Saito and Mori?
Saito. Yeah, I saw Saito and Mori were like freaking out. Yeah.
I mean, this is the kind of stuff that, again, like, even from the small English speaking fan base there is, I'm sure 95% of them don't care, but man, what a cool video to see Ryo Saito getting excited, pulling up his iPad in the back of a venue to watch the announcement of Dragon Dia for Best of the Super Juniors. What a great video. And for them to acknowledge this in this way, great concept. I think this is a super cool match.
Yeah, and it's like especially like at a time where a lot of traditional figures in the industry are kind of being forced into like letting Dragon Gate back in for things. It's nice to see like the genuine response of like, hey, Dragon Gate is like at a point right now where like it just feels like it feels appropriate that there should be a Dragon Gate wrestler in Best of the Super Junior now. And I'm glad we're back to kind of this, like the whole thing with Taguchi. Hey, like I fully and firmly believe that no one is mad about Ryusuke Taguchi leaving if you're presented like, hey, you get Dragon Dia instead. If you know who Dragon Dia is.
It's an interesting, I guess, political anomaly where I really thought 2 years ago that Shima and Lindemann and T-Hawk would end up not as contracted New Japan wrestlers, but I thought they would spend way more time in New Japan than they ended up doing, and that New Japan would get cozy with Glate. That, you know, there would be a stronger partnership than there currently is.
I mean, Shima was in New Japan Cup.
I know,
Like,
I know, and you know, Lindemann did a Super Juniors, right?
Right, yeah, he did.
And he was awesome in it. That's right. You know, Lindemann did a Super Juniors. Was that last year or the year before? I got to look at that now, because he was great in that tournament, and that was 2022. So it was the same year Shima did New Japan Cup. So, you know, I really thought they would form a stronger partnership there. And you know, you look at that Glate roster now, and if they would have ridden with Shima and T-Hawk and Lindemann stronger, and they would have, you know, formed a bond, but you had to pick somebody from the Glate roster to be in this tournament that wasn't Lindemann, I mean, who would you go with? Like Soma, yeah, Soma, I guess. And man, I mean, that is.
Actually, what are we saying? Shima would make Yamamura be that person. Like who should it be?
Well, I don't know, because Yamamura would have to lose, and I legitimately don't know if Shima would want that.
That is the other side of it. That is very true. I don't know if he could actually put up with that. Yeah,
I'd like to see. I mean, you know, New Japan's clubhouse leader, there's still, you know, such a humongous gap between them and anybody else. You know, I said this, it'll be, I don't know when it's going up on voicesofwrestling.com, but I pitched in for Dragon Dia's profile for the New Japan B Block Super Juniors preview. And the point that I made is, you know, one, Dia debuted at the end of 2018. So there's just a large swath of people that haven't watched Dragongate since then that might not have ever seen this guy. And I think they're going to be impressed by how fluid his in-ring stuff is. But, you know, the other thing with Dia is, outside of a Ryukyu Dragon Pro show, and I think a shot in, maybe it was South Korea, he did a different Asian indie last year. I forget which one it was. He's never really wrestled outside of Dragongate. So for him to be in New Japan, I mean, obviously it's totally new opponents, but it's just a different environment that I'm curious to see how he adapts. I think he'll do very well. I'm just curious to see if he not only raises his profile on a global level, but also the Dragongate profile. And it was Taiwan. He wrestled in Taiwan last year. Yeah,
it was New Taiwan. Yeah, it's something where I think, like, in a way, for someone who's from like a real small town, this is seen like as a big statement of success for Dragongate's kind of thesis and strategy of, if you want to watch wrestling, Dragongate will come to your town. They will find a way to do that. Except for Dragon Dia's hometown, which is too small. You know, like they had to go do shows like in Nagano and around from there to pull that off. And it's something that, like, for me, this year has been such a wash for him, you know, because he's been just constantly, like, he's been having great matches. Like, I've been enjoying D-Courage with him and Tanaka and Kakuta. Don't get me wrong, Case, but like, he's essentially, like, you haven't been able, like, to put him into like big things because you're holding back because you want Yoshioka versus Kiyomiya and you wanted D-Courage versus Team Noah, and just because of that, he kind of has been sidelined in a way. So,
and not only that, but it will be, I think, become more prevalent after Korakuen than it was beforehand. But think about how much time we talked in 2022 about how D-Courage are the main characters of Dragongate. This promotion runs through them.
Yeah.
Big Hug is that on steroids. So the purpose of D-Courage, their existence means far less now than it did a year ago, or especially 2 years ago. Now they're just a babyface unit, and that's all they have to be. That's all they should be, because Big Hug is everything they are and more.
Yeah, it's just gonna be fun to see Dragon Dia and get to see him in this kind of scenario, and we'll keep abreast of what's happening in Best of Super Junior. The remainder of the Korakuen card: KZ versus Jackie Funky Kame in a singles match. Team veteran Yamato and Susumu versus Team Muscle Kota Minoura and Benkei. And then the main event, the big exclamation point. Case, you never played Metal Gear Solid, right?
No.
So, like, the big thing is that it's a stealth game, and if people notice you, they have giant exclamation points, and it's like, oh, I've been alerted, something's up here. Big giant exclamation point, open a triangle gate. champions, Shun Skywalker, Kai and Ishin versus Big Boss, Shimizu, Strong Machine J, and UT.
The combination of the main event with KZ versus Kame, something is happening.
Exclamation point.
Just something is happening. I can't tell what. I don't know what, but something is happening.
Yeah, it's just something like at a sense that it does, like, it makes sense why we don't have cards really for the 11th and 12th, even though that those are, I mean, Osaka and Kobe. But we will see coming out of Corcoran Hall, and we'll talk about that next week. Case, do you have anything else you want to touch on before we got out of here?
Yeah, let me say one other thing. We'll hold off. There's a conversation to be had on the Reiwa generation promo from the end of Dead or Alive last year. Let's watch Corcoran play out. Let's watch Osaka play out, and let's watch Kobe play out. Let's have that conversation next week. I do want to mention real quick before we go, and I should have mentioned this during the cage match stuff. I apologize. There's so much to talk about. I left this out. A credit to Dragongate. A marvelous job. I can't believe they pulled this off. You know, for 6 months now, Big Hug has wanted Kame, and they've recruited him, and they've done everything they can to get him in their unit. And all along the way, I've said, I don't have a feeling on this, good or bad. I have no feel on what they're going to do, because I can't imagine them recruiting Kame as hard as they have and him not ending up there. But also, I can't figure out how it won't be terribly awkward that he turned them down so many times and now he ended up there. And seamlessly, without fail, without question, they could not have executed the graduation of Vibes Kame into Big Hug Kame any smoother. Again, I have now short-term and long-term concerns for Vibes. Maybe, you know, all that will be answered by Corcoran Hall. But Big Hug landing Kame the way they did, it's such an impressive booking feat that I wanted to be sure to mention that before we got out of here, because I really didn't know how they were going to do that. It was one of those weird times in Dragongate where, you know, we can predict stuff and be wrong. And more often than not, I always say, you know, you'll think in Dragongate booking that there's option A or option B, and then Dragongate will throw in option 3. Like, they're just playing a different ball game than you are, and you realize they're so much smarter than you are when it comes to your predictions. This is one of those where I just thought, man, I don't know what they are going to do. This feels like it could hurt everybody involved, and instead it elevated everybody. Major props to them.
Yeah, and it's like the thing that, like, I made sure that, like, usually I'm okay with Dragongate and getting spoiled. It's just like I live 14 hours away, like, and I'm in my late 30s. Certain things are a young person's game, Case, and watching everything in Dragongate unspoiled is just not happening. But I made like a special attempt this weekend to go into and to make sure that I could watch Dead or Alive completely unspoiled. And God, I am so happy I did, because of how rewarding it is. Like, I don't get this sort of excitement where I'm trying to explain to my fiance why this was so good, and she's like, "Oh, I'm happy for you." I'm like, "No, you need to understand. We didn't see this coming, but Kame is now in Big Hug. Like, how did we not see this coming this way?" And I'm glad I didn't see this coming. You know, like it like adds it. It takes it to a completely different level.
I tried to explain to my girlfriend that at the end of this show that a guy got their head shaved and it was really emotional, and she couldn't grasp why that was a big deal. She was like, "Well, he got a haircut. Who cares?" I was like, No. It's like, it's symbolic. It's like a whole. She didn't get it.
You have to understand, babe. Like, he was in the cage because.
So there's a thing called Apuestas matches, right? So let me tell you about Blue Demon real quick. You know, I was like, what am I gonna do here? You know, she didn't get it.
Yeah, but gosh.
Shun Skywalker, by the way, 3 Apuestas matches in 4 years. 2021, 2023, 2024. He survived them all. I feel like, and I don't think he's going to lose one ever, or at least anytime soon. That should be noted. His stellar Apuestas record, and I think as we go along, I think he'll only be in more of these matches, and I think he'll only be more successful, and he'll start to really bring that up.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to see that, and I can't wait for Corcoran this Thursday, and we'll be back next week to talk all about that. You can follow us on Twitter at OpenVoiceGate. Case is at _ in your case. I'm at Fujiheya. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with you next week. Take care, everyone.
Hey kids, do you like wrestling? Well, we like wrestling too. We are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Myself and Chris Novembrino kind of doing a lazy river of wrestling criticism, going through the news and whatever happened in stateside television wrestling. And also, you know what? Sometimes we just like to watch old stuff and talk about that too. Love for you to give us a listen. If you haven't already, we are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.